A busy city street. A crowd of people are shouting at a counter. A guy hands over an order for 3 small and 2 large boxes to his partner. She hands over the bag. Thanks for the purchase. In the end, they sold absolutely everything. The girl addressed the guy, calling him Brother Shiro. The sale was a success. He thanked her for her help. He wanted to see their profit for the day. It was 51 silver coins and 10,900 bronze coins. If converted to yen, it would be 1,600,000. The investment was 127,550 yen, and the profit was so huge that while counting, he doubted whether they had calculated everything correctly. She certainly didn't expect this. This is amazing. In her opinion, Shiro's brother is very good at selling. He is like a magician. He was embarrassed, saying that he was not and that she was exaggerating. In Japan. The boy looked ahead. Just think, such places really exist. Now he stands in the middle of the forest. A portal opened to the side of him. Behind him is a town, just like in the fantasy. And in the sky hang 2 moons. But when he looks through the portal, his grandmother's room is in front of him. He has to think about it. His name is Amada Shiro, and he just moved into his grandmother's house. When he entered her room, he saw a portal to another world. But that can't be. He was probably just tired. He quit his job a month ago. He must be going nuts. It's a hallucination. Opening the closet again, he shouted that that was the point, that it was not a hallucination. He looked at the photos of his late grandmother. He thought that maybe this was the secret she was hiding. The grandmother had been missing for 7 years, and only a month ago the government confirmed her death. He remembered that when he was still very little and was walking down the street with his grandmother. He asked her to tell him his secret, but she refused, saying that then it would no longer be a secret. The angry boy told her that he hated her. She smiled and said that when he grows up, she will definitely tell him everything. She promises. In the end, Grandma disappeared. He still remembers her smile, even in the last photo. He asked her. Suddenly, he noticed a letter addressed to him behind the photo frame. Could it really be from his grandmother? He opened the envelope and read the contents. There, the grandmother apologized for not telling him, but she was a magician who came to Japan 80 years ago from a world called Rufardio. The letter describes 6 basic points. First, her room is connected by a portal to the world of Rufardio. Second, there is magic, skills, and other inexplicable power in Rufardio. Third, yes, there are dangerous monsters in it. Fourth, there are other races there besides the human race. Fifth, she put a ring in the envelope that will help him understand the language of another world. Sixth, he needs to put on the ring and read the book that lies behind the altar. He'll understand everything when he gets there. He shouldn't worry. The guy even started sweating. It was too much information. He checked the place his grandmother had spoken of, and there indeed was a ring and 2 books, but in an incomprehensible language. He remembered her 6th rule, put on the ring and read the book. After doing this, he realized that he actually began to understand the other language that the book was written in. Suddenly, a voice appeared in his head, telling him that he had acquired the skill of equivalent exchange. The boy was scared, not understanding who it was who was talking to him in his head. He fell on his butt from fear and the book fell out of his hands. He looked around in panic, but there was no one there. So he got a skill, just like in novels and games. Suddenly, the voice told him again that he had received the inventory ability. He heard this every time he received the skill. But what should he do next? Go to another world with new skills. He remembered his grandmother's words about how he would understand everything when he got there. He shouldn't worry. But he didn't know whether to go or not. His grandmother always said that the world was made for traveling, but it was already night. Tomorrow he would have to go to the store. The next morning, he looked at the photo of his grandmother and, folding his hands in a prayerful gesture, told his grandmother that they were going to another world. They were going to another world. Dressed comfortably and with a huge backpack thrown over his shoulders, he set off on his adventure. He walked forward along the path towards the village. The village had a small number of houses and mountains around it. There were even beastmen with weapons, swords, and magicians in hats. There were also ordinary people engaged in trade. The boy put his hand to his face so that the sun wouldn't shine in his eyes. He smiled happily. This town turned out to be quite beautiful. He was already hungry. Someone from the side called the guy, asking if he wanted some shashlik. He could give him a discount. The guy approached the merchant and asked whose meat he was selling. Horned rabbit meat for only 3 bronze coins. The guy scratched his head. Sorry, but he doesn't have any money with him. The merchant asked. In that case, he was just asking. The guy walked on. He even started drooling when he remembered the horned rabbit meat. It looked very tasty. The boy reached into his pocket and pulled out 4,200 yen. That was all he had left after going to the store. In his world, if only he could buy that rabbit with Japanese yen. At that moment, a magic circle appeared over the bills in his hand, turning them into local coins. The guy was surprised. What happened? Why did his money turn into something? It couldn't be. He understood instantly and ran back to that merchant. He asked the man if bronze coins looked like this or not. The man thought about it. It was obvious. He noticed the guy's clothes and asked if he was a traveler from another country, if his clothes were completely different. The guy was confused. He said that it was more or less like that. The seller was glad that he was right. The guy was glad. It means that his skill equal exchange works. He asked for 2 kebabs at first, but then thought about it and decided to take 3. The merchant decided to give him a discount and said that he would only have to pay 8 bronze. Because he was a traveler. He collected 3 kebabs and handed them to the boy, who thanked him. He told the old man that he was very kind. The guy had already decided in advance that it would be very tasty, but it turned out that his first meal in another world was nothing special. There weren't even any seasonings. This skill can change money. The problem is, can he change his yen back? The skill suddenly activated itself. He took the money of this world and wished to change it back into Japanese money, and the money was exchanged. It worked. This means that by using equivalent exchange, he can convert currencies from different worlds. It works both ways. In other words, if he makes a lot of money here, he will become rich. In Japan too. If he thinks so, it is their imbalanced skill. In his head, he was already bathing in a bathtub full of bills. This time, he wanted to try exchanging 10,000 yen. He used an equivalent exchange. In the end, they exchanged for 1 large coin. The color was different. Was it really silver? He turned to the merchant, asking the old man, "Do they have such money?" The man scratched his head in frustration. He was wondering if the boy had run out of bronze coins. He simply didn't have enough change for that. So 1 bronze coin was worth 100 yen, and 1 silver coin was worth 10,000 yen. He currently has 1 silver coin and 34 bronze coins. He cannot use 50 yen and 1 yen bills because the minimum required to exchange is 100 yen. That was great. Judging by the old man's reaction, his money was enough to buy everything he wanted in this city. He decided to start exploring the city. He didn't understand what place he had wandered into between the streets, but it was very lively there. He was delighted, he gasped. It was a market with a lot of people. He even got lost in his dreams and wanted to meet them, especially the girl with cat ears. Some people from the side were watching him attentively. Is it because he has such unusual clothes? Then in any case, he needs to buy new ones first. He was walking forward when he heard someone calling him. Turning back, he saw a little girl with a basket of flowers. She asked him if he wanted to buy some flowers. He turned around, seeing a child in front of him. He came closer to her and bent down, asking if she sold flowers and how much they cost. At first, she said the price was 3 bronze coins, but then, doubting, she answered that it was 2. The guy thought about it, and the girl, deciding that it was too expensive for him, decided to ask for just 1 coin. The boy said he agreed and asked her for a yellow flower. He gave her 3 bronze coins, because she said exactly that price the first time. The girl asked if it was true and okay. He replied that in exchange she would tell him something. The first question is, what is her name? Her name is Ina. He introduced himself as Amada Shiro, and said that it was nice to meet him. He asked to call him simply Shiro. The girl returned the handshake, saying that she was also glad to meet Shiro's brother. He decided to ask the following questions, and asked what the name of this city was. He is a traveler. Thanks to Ina-chan, he received a lot of useful information. This city belongs to the Gyoushounin kingdom and is called Ninorich. There are 3 types of currency here. 100 bronze coins equal 1 silver coin. 100 silver coins equal 1 gold coin. So 1 gold coin equals 1,000 yen. The average salary here is 8 silver coins a month. Apparently, only a couple of people have gold coins. Also, no one has the right to trade without the consent of the local authorities, not even a child like Aina. Suddenly, he had an idea. He turned to the girl asking if she could sell him 10 flowers. She agreed. And then, shocked, she asked if he was serious. He said yes, he wanted to buy them because they would be useful to him. He gave 30 bronze coins for it. The girl thanked the guy. He thought that his grandmother would be happy. The girl asked again which grandmother he was talking about, but he answered that it was nothing. He thanked her for the beautiful flowers. Aina was very happy because he said that the flowers were very beautiful. The guy asked her if she would show him where their city hall was. She said she would show him. Waving her hand, she told me to follow her. Finally, they came to the town hall building where the mayor's office was. It was a huge, very beautiful building. He asked if everything would be okay since he was not from here. She answered that everything would be fine, since everyone here was kind, but the sight of one granny was quite frightening. It was a woman of advanced age, clearly of a non-human race. She looked at the guy rather strangely, asking him if he was from another country. He replied that to some extent it was. Then she asked in that case to write down on a piece of paper her name and working hours, then to indicate the method of selling her goods. He can be a street vendor, but he must pay a tax of 10 bronze coins per day, that is 1,000 yen. Stall holders also have a tax of 10 bronze coins per day. Or a shop owner. There is a tax of 3 silver coins per day, that is 30,000 yen. He can choose one of these 3 positions. But she must warn that the contract for the shop owner will be valid for at least 10 days. Denny wanted to try being a litter box for 5 days starting tomorrow. He was even able to write in the language of another world thanks to the effect of the ring. Granny read his name and said it was weird. 1,000 yen a day. If you think about it, opening a shop at a flea market in the Tokyo area would cost 3,000 yen a day. He was glad how cheap everything was. The woman looked at him strangely. He covered his mouth with his hands, completely forgetting that he didn't know the prices in this world. Granny smiled. She said that their mayor is responsible for setting the prices, for the good of this city. She hopes that his business will prosper. The boy thanked her. It all took only 15 minutes. He was surprised that everything went so smoothly. He thought it was time for him to go back to the market, and she thanked the child for her help. She sighed and said a sad goodbye to the guy. He waved his hand and walked away in the other direction. She shouted at him that the market was in the wrong direction. She pointed her finger at him. She decided to accompany him. When they had time, they found themselves at the market. The girl asked him if he had already decided what he would sell tomorrow. I didn't think about that. I wonder what he might sell at that market. The girl decided to propose an idea. She thinks he could sell things for adventurers. As he should notice, there are a lot of them. Many people in this market are dressed like adventurers. This is because there are many monsters in the forest nearby. Adventurers who come to this city are focused on getting things. This was the forest he passed through to the village. He was lucky to be alive. He thought of an idea for adventure deer. That's why her flowers are so hard to sell. But her brother bought her a lot of flowers today, so she was happy. With her arms outstretched and a teary-eyed smile, she thanked him, saying that it was nice to meet him. She embarrassed him. She offered to give him a tour of the market. They went into a lamp and flint shop, a raincoat and sleeping bag shop, a sharpening stone shop, and also a rope shop. There were many shops there selling various goods to adventurers. Everything was as she said. They took each other's hands. The girl pointed him to the grocery store. The hero thought to himself that she was a good child. She would surely make a great wife. It showed further where lantern oil and stewed meat were sold. He was thinking about something completely different, that he wanted a beautiful wife and daughter for himself as soon as possible. The girl was distracted and asked him whether he was listening to her or not. She again asked him if he had decided what he was going to sell. He said yes. She was curious and asked him to tell her. He leaned over and whispered in her ear that he was going to sell. But she didn't know what it was. The next day, the guy was doing his warm-up. It was time for him to prepare his goods. A girl was running towards him. She greeted her brother, wishing him a good morning. The guy also greeted her, asking if she would be selling her flowers today. That was exactly it. She had gotten up so early to pick them. They were beautiful. He was sure she would sell a lot today. The girl smiled. She said she would sell a lot of these flowers and buy medicine for her mother. Waving to the guy, she said that they would see each other a little later and ran away. She ran from one person to another. A couple of times someone even pushed her. She sat on the ground with flowers spilling out of the basket and still offered others to buy flowers. The guy looked at this with tears in his eyes. She would definitely be able to do something, and he would try today too. A man approached him, called him, and asked what he was selling. He noticed the product. It was a paper box. He asked, "Is it some kind of homemade product or what?" The hero said that these are called matches. Inside this box are small wooden sticks that can create fire. He had never heard of such a thing before. How could they create fire? The hero decided to demonstrate. He said that he had to take one stick and strike it on the other side of the box. Right after that, the match in his hands lit up. It was easy. While he was demonstrating the ability of matches to this adventurer, he panicked, not understanding how it happened, and screamed at the top of his lungs. He was extremely shocked. The young adventurer fell to the ground in surprise. He asked him what he had just done, how he had managed to do it. The guy didn't understand his excitement. Was this really the first time he'd seen something like this? Deciding to show it to him again and again, it turned into fire. A huge crowd of people watching had already gathered around him. Everyone was extremely shocked. People were whispering. They didn't understand how it happened. He just hit the paper with a stick and fire appeared. Was it some kind of magic thing? It was just unbelievable. No one had ever seen anything like it before. He told everyone they could try it pretty easily. People grabbed the boxes and started trying it, and it worked. It was going great, so he was doing really well. When he was walking through the market yesterday, he noticed that no one in this town had heard of matches. So yesterday he went home and stocked up on them to sell as many as he could. One man had already lived for about 250 years, but this was the first time he encountered something like this. It was simply unthinkable. Of course, you can use a flint, but it takes too long. It's very heavy to carry magical tools. What can you do? This is all the cost of not having a witch on his team. Because of this, you have to spend a lot of time on a simple fire. The guy said that this is why he decided to free them from these problems. He brought them freedom and brought fire. He brought them matches. It all looked like some kind of presentation of a new invention. The guy shouted that he wanted to buy them. The crowd got excited and thought about buying them until the young adventurer stopped them. He asked not to understand him. Not so, and they were simply beautiful. But what was the price of these matches? Everyone thought that this was indeed a good question. They must have been very expensive. It's great that it's on everyone's mind. The guy said he needed to think about the price. Someone said he would take them for 80 bronze. That was a good price. Finally, the guy understood. To simplify things, he already has two options. The first is to sell them at an exorbitant price, but in small quantities. And the second is to sell them cheaper, but in many times larger quantities. In the first option, the revenue from one pack will be very large, but the number of clients will be limited. In the second, anyone will be able to buy them. But one pack will bring little income. He will have to make a choice. It's decided. Each box contains 40 matches. Just today, in honor of the opening of his store, he decided to make a special price on them. He told everyone that they could buy just one box for 5 bronze. Shocked people started shouting from all sides, asking for a large quantity of goods per person. That is 10 and 20 packs. The guy warned everyone in advance that they do not light if they are soaked. So you need to watch where they take it. Today, matches are selling very well. He sold them to at least 100 customers. The old man who came at the end was late when everything was sold out, and the guy gave him a queue number for tomorrow. The guy was already exhausted. He lay down on his back on the blanket and looked at the sky. He was afraid that tomorrow there would be even more people if things continued like this. Clouds were already gathering in the sky. He wondered if he would be able to handle all the customers tomorrow. He hoped he would be fine. And he shouldn't need flowers tomorrow. The girl continued walking around the market. She screamed and asked to buy flowers. She turned around when she saw Shiro. She asked him in surprise why he was standing there and how he got into the store. The guy said that he had sold out of his merchandise for the day, so he had to close. The girl thought it was simply unbelievable. He asked her how sales were going. The girl had a full basket of flowers behind her back. She replied that she didn't think so, and why didn't anyone like her flowers? She even cried while saying this. The guy quickly asked if she was okay. She turned away, telling him to forget. He didn't need to worry. She would just go on selling flowers. The guy shouted, asking her to wait, and ran after her, grabbing her hand. He asked her to listen to him at least a little. The girl, annoyed, screamed at the top of her lungs. She asked him to repeat what he had just said. He repeated his words again, that he wanted to know if she wanted to help him at the store tomorrow. She was surprised that he didn't mind her helping at the store tomorrow. She was surprised that he didn't mind her helping. He said that he really needed her and, of course, he would pay. The happy girl said that of course she would definitely help. She always wanted to work with him and nothing else. The boy scratched his head and thanked the girl. But she replied that he didn't need to thank her because she couldn't even sell flowers, and therefore she herself should be very grateful to him. Such an abundance of gratitude touched his heart. That's why he vowed to work himself to the bone tomorrow. For her sake, he would give it his all. The guy said goodbye to Anna until tomorrow. They waved their hands at each other, and the girl ran away contentedly. The guy hid around the corner of the house. He looked around to see if anyone was around. He didn't want to be noticed. 146. After speaking the secret word, a portal to his world opened before him. The portal was right there in his closet, and he could summon it just by thinking about it. It was convenient. He hoped no one would figure it out before then. Now he seemed to have done everything. It was time to go home. He portaled to his own home in Japan, taking off his shoes first. He sat down on the floor, placing his backpack and a bag of foreign coins next to him. That was all the money he had earned that day. He used the equal exchange skill and exchanged everything for yen. That was all he had gotten for the day, and he was happy with it. He calculated the amounts on a calculator, and his profit today is simply frightening. Compared to his previous job, it's just something. Selling matches turned out to be profitable. It must be agreed that the figures are very approximate. He worked only an hour. If all goes well, then life will be a joy for him very soon. To sit without work, playing and reading. That is his dream. And now he needs to get busy preparing for tomorrow, and not indulge in empty dreams. He walked into the store. It was quite large. There were many people there at the time. He looked around, trying to remember where the match rack was. They were somewhere in this part. He had taken a large cart with wheels with him in advance. He noticed a rack of matches that weren't in paper wrappers. They were water and wind-resistant survival matches. He hadn't known such matches even existed. He'd be a fool not to sell them. He collected a whole bunch of these matches. He planned to get all the money out of these adventurers. He hoped that this amount of matches would be enough for him. The seller thought to himself that this guy was an arsonist and looked at the hero strangely. Later, Shiro realized that he couldn't carry all of them home. There were too many of them, and he only had 2 arms. For a second, he wondered what would happen if he used the equal exchange right now, here. Looking around, he used the interdimensional storage. A gate resembling an eye appeared right in front of them. He was surprised. He threw 1 pack of matches into it as a test, and then the rest from the basket. It was his own pocket dimension. He was incredibly happy about this fact. That time, before the first day of trading, he had to stuff all those matches into his backpack. And thanks to his previous job, because of which his back is in terrible condition. But he would never be able to use his backpack with so many matches. Right in front of him, a summary appeared in the form of a census of what was inside the vault. Honestly, it was even starting to scare him. What did his grandmother do to get such power? He won't have to carry anything anymore. This power is just unreal. He is too shocked by it. He stares wide-eyed at his palm, which opened this magical pocket dimension. He'll sell matches for another 4 days, and then he'll decide what to do next. With such opportunities, he will definitely become rich. With a determined look, he raised his fist up. The girl pointed at the guy, saying that he was that weird man from the store and he was talking to himself again. The worried woman said not to point at people. And suddenly he went through something. He decided to quickly shut up and go home to get ready for tomorrow. She said goodbye to her mother, saying that it was time for her to go. Her mother wished her luck for today. The woman was lying in bed by the open window. Her mother pointed out that she had forgotten to take flowers with her. She smiled and said that she didn't need them today. She was helping Shiro. The girl waved goodbye to her mother. At the same time in Japan, Shiro's grandmother's house. The boy looked at his grandmother's portrait, saying that it was time for him to go. He wanted her to wish him luck. He put his hands together in a pleading gesture. He opened the wardrobe with the portal and, throwing on his briefcase, went inside. He came out into the street in another world, where his shoes were already standing. Well, it was time for him to start. He ran forward and saw Anna standing nearby and called her by name. They wished each other good morning. The guy said that he hoped he hadn't kept her waiting long. Of course he hadn't. She just came herself. But maybe she did stand there for a little while. But she clearly wasn't against it. After all, the customers were already here and there were a lot of them, despite it being so early. The guy was shocked by this. The girl, clenching her fists, said enthusiastically that they needed to give it their all today. Her eyes sparkled. The guy asked to wait, said that he would now give it all away. Suddenly, he shuddered. They had too many customers. They were blocking the nearby shops. Other traders were clearly panicking about it. This is bad. He can imagine where this will lead. Clearly nothing good. Someone called out to him from behind, and he flinched. It was the same man who had sold him shashlik on his first day here. The man was surprised by the huge queue to the young man. Before the young man could turn around, he asked for forgiveness, saying that he would organize everything now. But finally he saw the man who had spoken to him and recognized him. He asked him to wait a second and called him Lord Rhodacy. The man waved and said hello with a smile. There was a girl standing next to him. He said he'd heard rumors about a new thing called a match. He couldn't believe the guy had done all that himself. But he wondered if he was okay. He was just getting bogged down with customers. And he was. He said it was bad. A woman standing nearby said that in that case they had a small shop on the outskirts of town. They could let them use it today. That way he wouldn't be in the way of other vendors. The guy was embarrassed and asked if they were really sure they could help him. The woman replied that they had a day off today anyway, and, of course, he didn't need to think about it. The guy happily said that he and the girl were very grateful. He asked if he could ask a question. He wanted to know if this woman was the Lord's wife. It turned out she was his sister. But the guy didn't see any similarities between them. They had to move a little further, towards Nakuya, where their goal was. When they arrived, they saw a rather convenient little shop. It was time for them to get to work. So they got down to business in no time. The guy decided to practice again. He showed her 2 boxes of matches and said that if he said M, then she should give him the small box. If he said B, then the big one, and she should not forget that they also had matches that did not get wet. Anna was panicking a lot. You could see it in her eyes. But she said that everything was fine and she would sort it out. The guy panicked. He didn't think she was okay. She looked pretty worried. But in any case, it's time for them to open the store. He shouted down the street, apologizing for the delay. The store is open for today. There was a huge line since early morning. He said that people with tickets have priority in service first. The guy started dictating to the girl what to bring and give him. The first order was 3 small and 2 large boxes. Then 5 small ones and 1 big one. But the box fell from the girl's hands. She reached for the top shelf, asking to wait and apologizing for the delay. Then 4 waterproof ones and hurry up. The guy asked if everything was okay, and Anna apologized. The girl was doing badly, all the things were falling. But she noticed how amazing it was that the matches were sold out in an instant. People were pushing in line to get in first. The guy thanked for the purchase and called the next buyers. They are selling at breakneck speed. After a while, everything was already sold out. The guy apologized to the crowd, saying that everything was already sold out. The girl was very surprised. Did they really sell everything and that's how it was? And in the guy's opinion, it was all thanks to her help. He also thanked the man and his sister for helping them as well. They said that there was no problem, so it was time to find out how much they had earned today. He started counting how much they earned today, and it just couldn't be. He thought he would earn no more than 200K per hour. But now, after 3 hours of sales, they have 1,500,000 on hand. That's almost 490,000 yen an hour. That's what millionaires make. Okay, but now they need to move quickly before anyone notices. The guy threw the coins into his briefcase. He slung it over his shoulders, but his back bent backwards under the weight. It was too hard. He could use his pocket dimension, but he doesn't think it's a good idea to use it in front of others. It won't work anyway. He handed Anna a small bag of money, saying that it was her salary for today. She was clearly confused. She bowed loudly, thanking him. He stroked the child's head with his palm, asking if she was thinking of buying something for herself and her mother. Besides, she deserved it, because her help today was invaluable. The girl denied it. She should have thanked him for letting her work with him. She wanted to thank him. The guy pointed with his finger at her to be quiet, shutting her up before more words of gratitude. He winked and said that from now on he wanted to speak without formalities. And she herself gave him a very good help. The girl grumbled. She just wanted to thank him. And the guy laughed because of her pouty face. Suddenly, the girl's stomach growled from hunger, and both of them noticed it. The girl was very embarrassed by this, gasping and blushing. The guy remembered that they didn't even have a lunch break today. Then why don't they have a snack? He reached into his backpack, pulling out sandwiches from his world with different fillings. He handed one to the child. She asked if it was really bread. The boy replied that, to be completely precise, it was a sandwich. It was the first time she had seen such snow-white bread. After taking a bite, she shouted to Shiro how wonderful and delicious it was. He was glad that she liked it. There were sparkles in her eyes. They were sitting on a blanket near the stall where they were selling today and eating. Someone approached them from the side. The stranger apologized and asked if he could take a minute of their time. Shiro looked at her and asked again if the girl was addressing him. She said yes. She heard that someone was selling a new thing, like matches, I think, and she thinks that someone is Shiro. He confirmed her suspicions. He apologized, but he couldn't sell them to her now because they were all sold out. But the girl denied it. She didn't want to buy anything. She said she came here to see him. Her name is Karen Senkarika, and she is the mayor of the city. The girl knows she is late. She stands with her arms crossed under her chest, looking important. Her name is Karen Senkarika. She is the mayor of this city. She was quite young and richly dressed. Her hair was long and neatly styled. The guy was surprised that the mayor of the city of Ni Norwich was a woman. For him, this could not be. Such a young and beautiful girl was the mayor. He expected some older guy in strange clothes, or rather, in their complete absence and a mustache. The guy quickly got up from the blanket and scratched his head, asking what the city mayor wanted from him. First, she asked to let her express her gratitude. For the fact that a merchant of such a level was engaged in trade in her city, she bowed gracefully to the boy, thanking him. He asked her to stop, putting his hands forward in a request for calm. He said that he should be thanking her. He was saying thank you for allowing him to trade here. The girl was surprised. It turned out that the guy had rather low self-esteem. She turned her back to him, thinking, most of the merchants in this city are hard-headed. Well, the guy really thinks that might be true. The girl suddenly turned back to face him and asked for his help. Then they discussed something for some time. This city is in the middle of nowhere. All the merchants have an "I'm just carrying a heavy load" attitude, and all the things the city needs are sold at an inflated price. While they were talking, Anna, having eaten her fill, was lying down and already, it seemed, had her 10th dream. The mayor of the city wants to get out of this situation. With her arms outstretched, she seemed to be solemnly shouting as loudly as possible that they need a market in this city. The guy looked at her with his mouth open. He sat down on the blanket again, and even Anna seemed to stand up. But there was something else she wanted. The guy thought she was joking. The girl pulled out a key from somewhere and said she wanted him to take it. He didn't understand anything. Just don't tell me it's a duplicate of the key to her house. This doesn't sound like a romantic drama. His mind is clearly elsewhere. And at the same moment as he thought about it, the girl, winking, said that this key was a duplicate of the key to her house. She looked at him too, coquettishly. The guy even choked. Because of the strange expression on the boy's face, the mayor asked if everything was okay with him. He, covering his mouth with his hands, said that nothing was wrong. Suddenly, the child screamed that she understood everything. The mayor wants to live with Shiro's brother. He was embarrassed, asking her why she was saying such a thing. But she was convinced that the mayor definitely wanted to marry him. Apparently, finally realizing how wrong everyone had thought, she began to deny it. It's not like that. It's not that she's lonely and looking for a marriage candidate. That's not what she thinks. She was trying to justify herself furiously. Then, trying to make a calm expression, she coughed and said that they needed to get back to the topic. She had come to ask him for a favor. She turned away from him again. The guy at that moment asked if she was married. She pointed her finger towards the houses in the village, indicating the largest and furthest one. There was an empty house there, which he could enter with a key, and she wanted him to start trading on the ground floor of it from tomorrow. He didn't understand why, but in fact, the day before she had received complaints from other traders. They were talking about how they couldn't sell anything when people were lining up like that right in the middle of the market. The guy understood what she was talking about. He himself noticed this. Indeed, it is difficult to continue trading like this. The girl smiled. She said that if he wanted, she could show him everything. He could decide after he had seen everything. They moved on through the market, passing other traders and people the mayor greeted. Finally, they arrived at the house she was talking about. It was a 3-story cottage with a balcony on the 2nd floor. They didn't know what to do. The house looked amazing. It didn't look cheap. Inside, there was a huge staircase to the 2nd floor at a beautiful chandelier. The guy asked if everything was okay. It was even a little bit more than he imagined. The hostess said that she hoped they would like it here. By the way, the mayor wanted to ask him something. The guy turned to her, listening. At that moment, the child ran up to Shiro's brother and he leaned down so she could whisper something in his ear. Anna whispered that perhaps the mayor would ask him now if he had a mate. The guy suddenly shouted that he didn't have a girlfriend, putting his hand to his heart. The mayor was embarrassed and shouted that it was wrong. That was not what she wanted to hear. The boy laughed, saying he was just kidding. The kid joined in the laughter. Karen became even more embarrassed and puffed out her cheeks. She blew out her breath, saying he shouldn't laugh at the mayor. She made a serious face, exhaled, and asked why such a merchant. How he wants to do trade in this city. It's a small town with a population of 500. It's embarrassing for the mayor to say that. But he can make a lot more in other towns and villages. The guy scratched his head. He knew she was right. He thought before answering and said that he thought it was just because he liked it here so much and he had only been in Ninerich for 3 days. But Ina tries so hard to work for him. The girl was flattered by these words. Also, in this city there is a mayor who is so kind to him despite the fact that he is not from here. Her face also turned red. Something like that. Now he just loves this whole city. Having said this, he spread his arms out to the side, smiling. He's from another world and does not know other cities. But he is sure that there are not many cities here where it is as warm as this one. He remembered the kind granny at the town hall. The kebab seller with his sister and his crowd of customers. The mayor called Shiro by name and thanked him for talking about his love for this city. She was truly very grateful. The child screamed at Shiro's brother that he made the girl cry, and the boy instantly began to apologize to her and ask for forgiveness. The mayor extended her hand to shake his, saying that he could call her Karen, and smiled. The boy asked to call himself simply Shiro without formalities. Aina also introduced herself, smiling. The adults shook hands together. They said it was nice to meet each other, and Aina placed her small palm on top of theirs. And so this young man, starting out selling matches, got his own shop in just 3 days in another world. According to the diagram, he was moving too fast. From street vendor to counter and from counter to shop. I'm sure Grandma is striking a victory pose in heaven. The next day, he signed a contract for a month's store at the town hall and immediately began trading. 5 days later, the line today was not getting any smaller. Already dressed in a formal suit and tie, together with a geisha, the guy bowed to the customers, apologizing. But today's supply of matches in their store had run out. Everyone was confused. He thinks he's sold enough matches for everyone in town today. It's a mystery why they're still selling. It turns out that Aisha was cleaning the room at that time, wearing an apron and headscarf, but had already finished it. He wished her good night, telling her to go and rest on the second floor. But Aina asked if she could help with anything else. The guy said that it was not necessary and everything was fine. She seemed to be a little upset. The guy pulled himself up, throwing his hands up and yawning on the chair. Then he took 2 mugs, a teapot, and some goodies on a tray. He, having climbed up the stairs, opened the door to the room, calling Aina with a smile. But he was surprised to see that she had already fallen asleep on the couch. No wonder, she was only 8, and she was working like that. He put the tray on the table not far from the couch. Turning around, the hero saw that Aina was slowly starting to open her eyes. The guy asked if he had woken her up. She, still sleepy, beamed and said that it was Daddy's fault. The guy was embarrassed by this. What kind of daddy was he? He certainly wasn't. He told Aina that he was Shiro, but she kept talking, calling him Daddy and asking him to pick her up. She reached out to him, who was embarrassed. He finally agreed and picked up the baby. He was a little embarrassed. The baby hugged him back. She was very happy that her dad finally hugged her. Aina's mom did the same, and without finishing her sentence, the girl suddenly fell asleep again, hanging on him. He was very surprised by this. The boy asked himself how he was a father now. The cups with the drink were still standing on the table, steaming. Covering the child with a blanket, he said that if she wanted anything, she should just tell him, and at that very moment he would do everything possible to help her. True, the child did not listen to this, because he slept soundly with a smile on his face. It was the 6th day of the store's sales. Shiro decided to give Aina a rest today, even though she wanted to work more and was clearly unhappy about it. The guy went outside. He bowed almost 90 degrees and shouted to all the remaining customers in line that, unfortunately, all the goods were sold out. Despite the fact that it was not the first day of sales, every day a huge crowd of people wishing to buy goods still came. The guy went inside again and, tired, lay down on the table, muttering, "How hard it is to work alone." Suddenly the bell on the door rang, notifying the owner that a customer had entered the store. It was Karen. She apologized for disturbing him. The guy immediately called out to her. He immediately jumped up from his seat, saying or bragging that they had sold out again today. The girl was not surprised. On the contrary, she was pleased. She had already expected something like this from such an experienced trader as he. The guy did not quite agree with this. Looking at the boxes behind him, he really didn't understand why the number of purchases was 5 times greater than the number of people in the city. It worried him. The girl heard some rumors that someone was reselling matches in another city with great success. These rumors were spread by people who, having saved up matches in his shop, ran to tell others about it. Now he was thinking that maybe he should set a limit on the number of boxes. The mayor called Shiro, telling him that she had decided to come to him today with a request. She had a serious look. Apparently the request was really serious. He suggested that they talk about it upstairs. He prepared 2 cups of hot drink and placed them opposite himself and the guest. They sat down at the table opposite each other. He asked what her request was. She put her palms together, rested her chin on them, and decided to start from afar. She asked if he knew that there was an adventurers' guild in her city. He knew of one, and that it was called Ginsuki, and asked if his information was true. She hadn't even thought he knew its name and was pleasantly surprised by the fact. Many of his customers were adventurers. Adventurers' Guild. It was something like a middleman. Clients asked them for something, and then adventurers take on the task. Something like an organization that guarantees success. They are usually tasked with killing monsters that attack livestock and humans. They are also tasked with collecting mushrooms and medicinal herbs to create medicines and other things. Since the guy already knew all this, then she decided not to delay. She said that Ginsuki is the only adventurer guild in her city. Guildmaster Ginsuki must have done something to the mayor, because she looked away without finishing her sentence. The boy became very curious about what happened to the guildmaster. The guildmaster is the leader of the Adventurers Guild, a word that makes any boy's heart flutter. The guy jumped up from his chair, resting his hands on the table, and asked what had happened to him. The girl didn't understand what he had said at first. She seemed to be holding the tension, speaking intermittently. Because of this, the guy himself began to get nervous. But in the end, to all the tension, she said that the guild leader had escaped last night. This clearly worried her. On top of everything else, it turned out that they had no money at all to support the guild. This put pressure on her, and the adventurers who were members of the guild were about to leave the city, and all the money of the guild was with its leader. The guy finally realized how bad everything was. It was clearly a huge burden on the girl's shoulders. But it turns out the mayor has a plan. The guy was even surprised. She had thought it all out long ago. Getting up from her seat, she stood by the window looking out, while the guy remained sitting in his seat. The Adventurers Guild based in the capital wants to establish a branch in their city. Until now, they refused because of Gensuki, but in view of the recent news, they are already thinking about giving their consent. The guy realized that they were about to lose an important part of the Adventurers' city. He thinks that this decision will be the right one. The girl sighed with relief. She thanked him and said that she felt better from his words. The guy, embarrassed by the mayor's body, quickly turned away in panic, saying that he had done nothing at all. She decided to get down to business. Turning back to him, she said that if he agreed to fulfill her request, a guild from the capital would soon visit them. They would decide whether to establish an official branch here. So she asked Shiro that she would like him to show their representatives his matches. The guy wasn't against it, but he didn't understand what the point was. And the point was that she had never seen anything like it in her life, not even in the capital, let alone other cities. She examined the matchbox in her hand. She didn't understand where the hell he got them from. That was the whole point. She asked not to be misunderstood. She wasn't trying to get to the bottom of it. It was just that if he was the only one who had them, it might interest the representatives. He understands what she's talking about. Basically, he needs to get their attention with matches. Like reporters saying that this city has unique items that clearly stand out from the rest. Then maybe everything will go well, right? The mayor was surprised that the guy understood everything so quickly and independently. Everything was clear to the guy. He would still think about something else that could surprise them in addition to the matches that he was throwing in his hand at that moment. The girl called him by name. She was surprised by how kind he was. She promised to repay him for this request. She looked at him with all gratitude, fingering her fingers. The next day, everything was sold out again, and Shiro, now with the child, apologized to the buyers again for this. Their faces were still surprised. The girl returned to work. She was standing in an apron and a headscarf again. She was sweeping again. The boy was sitting on a chair, his arms crossed behind his back and sighing. Aina asked her brother Shiro if everything was okay if he really wanted to go to the toilet. He, holding a pen between his lips and nose, was thinking about what could attract the attention of the representatives and what it could be. The girl looked at him questioningly. It seemed he finally understood something. He stood up from his chair and headed towards the door. He told the girl that he would go to Karen's son for a while. A little later, in the city, he was sitting in the office of the mayor's girlfriend. She was sitting at her desk and was clearly surprised by his decision. She couldn't even say his name the first time. She didn't understand if he was serious, but he was standing right in front of her, completely serious. He wanted to be an adventurer. He asked to be allowed to accompany them. The girl was shocked. The hero is in the mayor's office. The shocked girl asks if he really wants to accompany adventurers on missions. Is he serious about this? This seems to confuse her a little. The guy really looked like he wasn't joking. That was the only way he could get a better idea of what the adventurers wanted. She asked him if he understood what he was going to. He said nothing. The only place an adventurer could go in her city was the Western Forest. They had nothing else. But it is teeming with various scary monsters with huge fangs and claws. He knew about it. But he was talking specifically about adventurers who collected herbs and mushrooms. Now she understood what he was talking about. In that case, everything was much safer. It made her think. She would like to introduce him to some people, but to be honest, her current relationship with Gensuki is terrible. She looked at the guy through her fingers. Last night, the Vice Guild leader came to her and told her about it. He begged very hard to lend them any money. He literally fell to his knees and started crying, begging for it. He was desperate. In the guy's opinion, it was quite straightforward. And by the way, how much money did they need? That's what the guy was really interested in. She showed the number 10 on her fingers and said that this much. Her face was strange. Then, after thinking for a moment, he asked if they meant 10 silver coins. But she shook her head again. And then he finally understood what they meant. Gold coins. Realizing this, he shouted at the top of his lungs. The mayor, putting her finger to her lips, told him to be quiet, because he was too loud. The mayor leaned her elbows on the table and held her head in her hands. That kind of money couldn't be found in a remote town like this. She might think about it if it were a tenth of the amount. But it wasn't. It won't be easy to ask them for a favor after everything. Taking a pen in her hand, she said that she would write a letter, but noted that he should not hope for much. The guy took that very letter and was already walking down the street holding it in his hands. After that, he went to the Ginsuki Guild in the western part of the city. The path was through the houses in the village. Finally, approaching the building itself, he saw a huge house with a large wooden gate in front of him. The guild was in the western part of the city, back to the present. He was standing in front of the guild building. So this was where the local guild lived. It was his first time visiting the guild. He was even a little nervous. In his mind, when he opens the doors, he will see a bunch of adventurers from all sides who will fill their bellies and drink alcohol, having fun. Then, one of them will trip him, and the guy will fall with a loud sound on the floor face down. Shiro's nose will bleed from the impact with the floor. 2 drunk adventurers will approach him, grab his head, saying that here is a newbie. They will ask where his respect for his elders is, and the second one will laugh at him. The guy will shout that he is not an adventurer, but a merchant. The man who bullied him would pull his hair, telling him how handsome he was and he was a little wrong. In that case, he would ask him to evaluate his punch, with which he could even break a stone. This is clearly a threat. Shiro will be scared and will cry. But all of this was just Shiro's thoughts. He hadn't even gone inside yet. He thought that in life anything would happen. Finally, pushing the door in front of him, he collected his thoughts and, pushing them with all his strength that they even collided with the walls, he screamed at the top of his lungs. That he asked for forgiveness for disturbing them. But he saw that everything around was absolutely empty, not a soul. There was nothing and no one. But some sounds were heard nearby, and the frightened guy asked who was there. The sounds came from under the guest counter. Coming closer to her, he tried to attract attention by making a voice, but he was ignored. On the other side, on the floor, sat a trembling man. Then he went behind the counter itself. Again asking for forgiveness, he came up from behind and touched the seated man, saying that he needed to talk to him. Finally, he got attention. The tearful girl turned her head towards him. It was not a human girl. She had long black hair tied in a ponytail and long rabbit ears. Empty liquor bottles were scattered all around her. Finally coming to her senses, she jumped up in fear and screamed with wide eyes. How long had he been here? The guy wondered if this trembling, tearful girl was the guild staff. She turned her attention back to him and, cowering, asking, screaming why he was touching her. He denied it. Panicking even more, she screamed even louder, terrified that he really liked her. He didn't even know what to say to that. In a nutshell, she can summon 1,000 muscular men from Gensuki's poster. In her imagination, it clearly sounded and looked very cool. But in reality, it was different from reality. The guy didn't want to sound too rude, but he hadn't seen anyone here in the guild. The girl cringed in offense at this and, trying to justify herself somehow, said that sometimes they still came here. He squeezed his palm tightly into a kulon. She screamed that, but even so, she alone can offend him. She was convinced that her blow could even destroy a stone, and she told him not to look down on her. She twitched as if in convulsions. It was unclear whether she could really fight because she simply swung her fists, missing. The guy realized that this girl would definitely be a pain in the ass. He looked at her with a blank, shocked look, as if he had gone into the astral plane. While she continued to kick, making sounds but was still unable to calmly deliver a single blow. The guy was clearly fed up with this, so he sighed tiredly, apologized, and asked where he could find the deputy head of the guild. He wished she would call him. The girl froze in place with her fist raised to strike and looked at him. It turned out that she was the deputy head of the guild. That was her. The girl pointed her finger at herself. The guy screamed so loudly in surprise that the guild building even shook. The reason Emily is Gensuke's deputy leader is quite simple. It's because the guild now consists of only her. The bunny girl stood there with tears in her eyes and a bottle in her hands. She had an employee tag around her neck. Actually, there was another girl here, but she disappeared for an unknown reason a day after the guild leader escaped. In the end, out of the 3 employees, 2 escaped, and Emily, unwillingly, was promoted as the only remaining member of the guild. The girl drank from stress. Emily was already pretty tipsy. She thought that the 2 who ran away had an affair. That's why they disappeared, in her opinion. But she thinks that they didn't know that she knew. The guy sat silently on a stool opposite the girl at the counter and listened to her drunken ramblings. She was clearly showing, hugging the air, where and how the 2 escaped guild members kissed. But then she clearly went off on a tangent, saying things that needed to be censored, where they were and what they were doing, and even talking about the guildmaster's room. She was extremely angry, saying whose nerves could stand it. She hoped that they were caught by bandits, and as a duet, no less. She was very angry. In general, the guild leader who smelled like a lecherous goblin just pissed her off. After saying this, she exhaled, closing her eyes. The guy interrupted her at this point. He said, trying to calm her down, that she really tried hard, and he really hoped that she had already finished pouring out her soul to him. He was squeezed like a lemon, because after that, he seemed to have aged. The girl was a little touched because he had listened to her grumbling for 5 hours. He, in her opinion, is a very kind guy. Saying this, she unbuttoned the buttons of her work jacket, and he wondered why she started doing this. The girl smiled and began to button them back up, apologizing and saying that he seemed to have some business. He was confused. The guy finally remembered this and said that, firstly, he had brought her a letter from the mayor. The girl was so surprised by this news that she shuddered. Emily asked again if they were talking about the same person, but she spoke very unflatteringly about Karen. There was clearly some mistake in her idea of the mayor. The guy, having heard all the insults, at first even thought that the granny's ring was faulty and that he had obvious problems with the translation of the ring. He didn't know who she was talking about. He meant Karen, who was the mayor of Ninuruk, and asked if Emily knew her. In his mind, the girl was the kindest and most beautiful. Surrounded by bouquets of roses, she held a cup in her hands with an elegant smile. But the guildmaster continued to insult her, saying that she is the one who has all the nutrients like omega, 3B vitamins, and glucose for the brain go straight to her chest. That same Karen's son, the most cruel woman. If this letter is from her, then there is nothing wrong with her actions. Having said this, she immediately began to tear the paper into small pieces with particular cruelty. The guy screamed in surprise, and his eyes widened so much that it seemed that they were about to jump out of their sockets. The vice guild leader seemed to be in a trance. She said that she thought that things like love and betrayal were the worst things in the world. The guy in the background was trying to gather up the remains of the letter, catching them in the air. And in this, Karen came into her life. A horrible woman. Emily sat down on the counter humming to herself. She thought Karen had gotten rid of Ginsuke and invited another idiot, that is, another adventurer's guild. He should understand that. She started insulting her again, saying that the mayor was bad with immortality cubed, and asked the guy if he agreed with her. At that time, the mayor herself, sitting in her office, sneezed, thinking that she had caught a cold, but it was because she was remembered. The deputy head fell to her knees on the counter and, leaning her hands on it, began to sob. It hurt. It hurt a lot. She said that the mayor did not give her some 10 coins, and she even prayed on her knees. The guy didn't agree with her, because it was a big sum. 10 gold pieces was no joke. Besides, Karen's son had a lot of important things to worry about. The tearful girl turned to him with a shudder. She thought he was just protecting this woman with all his might, didn't she? He obviously liked her. In general, speaking about this Karen, she still loves her and also considers herself and her best friends. After these words, she got divorced even more than before. She needs to stop insulting other people, especially her best friends. Without money, the guild would be finished. She had no idea what to do now. She lay on her back, covering her eyes with her wrist. because the guy understood her attitude towards the mayor. He said that they needed to let go of the letter topic. Besides, he would repeat it for Emily. He has an order for the Ginsuki Guild. After saying these words, he took a handkerchief out of his jacket pocket and handed it to the tearful girl. She opened her eyes and turned to him. She stood up. Taking the handkerchief, Emily asked him how she could help. They had been talking about something all this time, and finally she realized that he wanted to accompany adventurers. If that was what he wanted, then she would turn it into a request. But nothing like that had ever happened before. The guy asked her if it was difficult for her to fulfill his request. She could only think of one qualified party. It was a high-ranking party consisting of 4 members. That's why she would have to pay a lot. And call this party Azure Flash. At this time, 4 people were at the fire, watching the fire. There were 2 girls and 2 guys. The tall man, unlike the others, was not sitting but standing. The girl in the strange hat looked as if with indifference but very attentively. The other one, with cat ears, smiling like the guy sitting next to her, briefly about everything. The main character found out that the closet in his house was connected to another world. There he met a girl named Aina-chan in the city where he appeared. She was selling flowers there. One thing led to another, and he began selling goods in a store lent to them by the city's mayor Karen's son, who gave him a duplicate key to the huge Icarus building. After that, they decided to explore the Western Forest to open a branch of the Royal Adventurers Guild, and it all came to the point that he should be introduced to some adventurers. Like the deputy head of Ginsuki, he closed the shop, putting a sign on it that they were not working. The girl asked her brother if he really wanted to leave the shop for a while. Yes, he will do it, but he thinks it is only for 3 days. He will go and play a little and pretend to be an adventurer. The girl understood what he meant and said that she had something she wanted to do so she could rest. He asked her what she wanted to do, but she mumbled that it was nothing special. She was obviously hiding something from him. He looked at her questioningly but still let the question drop. He bent down, pulled the bow on the laces of his sneakers and, holding them tighter, said that in that case he needed to leave already. The girl suddenly stopped him, placing her small hand on his shoulder. He turned to her. She asked her brother Shiro to take care of himself with a smile. He smiled at her and walked ahead. Immediately hearing his steps, the deputy head of the guild looked out. She said that she had been waiting for him and asked him to hurry up and go inside already. Today she was already clearly in a good mood. He was surprised to see Emily's son. His mind immediately flashed back to their last meeting when the girl was drunk and behaving indecently. She turned around and asked him why he was so scared. No one was going to eat him or anything. Emily decided to introduce him to the leader of this team and pointed to a young guy who responded. He and his team, which consisted of 4 people in total, were sitting on the sofa. Emily decided to go straight to the introduction. They were Ginsuki's pride, being a silver-ranked party. They would accompany him on a mission to collect high-class herbs. Shiro was a little embarrassed. Finally, he saw a flash of azure. A girl in a strange hat with an emotionless face was sitting on the couch. Behind her, leaning her elbows on the furniture, stood a girl with cat ears and slit pupils. A young guy and also the leader of the detachment called out to him, greeting him. He said that they had not seen each other recently. The leader brought his straightened palm closer to his head. It was reminiscent of a greeting gesture, like in the army. The hero looked at him attentively, rubbing his chin with his hand. He thought for a while, trying to remember him. But he still remembered that he was the first guy who bought matches from him. He was pleased that the shop owner remembered him. He said with a smile that he was the leader, and his name was Lyra. He asked to let him introduce his companions. They also had a priest, Rolf. Rolf is a huge, tall man with a beard. He has rather narrow eyes. He would be dressed in armor, which was covered on top by a mantle and cloak. Around his neck he had a chain with a sacred symbol. He greeted him with a smile and said that he was glad to meet Shiro. He hoped that they would work well together. He may be a priest, but he is a military man waving his mace. He usually acts like that, but it is better not to anger him. The next member of their party is their mage Neska. She was a young girl in a long cloak and a strange hat with a staff. Her hair was very long and almost reached the floor, although the girl was wearing heels. The leader asked her to greet the new man, but she was rather timid. She said coldly that she was glad to meet him and looked away. Niska hardly speaks, but she was on first-name terms with Magia. That's how the leader described her. Although Niska is a little slow with the spells, the mage spoke out to this, advising the leader not to stick his nose where it is not wanted. He replied that he would stop as soon as she started casting faster. He was clearly indignant. She would think about it. Next in line to get acquainted was the last person in the team, but he did not have time to finish. At this time, the cat girl, jumping up, did a trick in the air above the head of the leader. She happily landed right in front of the guy, standing between him and Lyra. She introduced herself, calling herself Kilfa. The guy noticed her ears. He asked if she was a cat. She pricked up her ears and looked at him. It was a strange answer for them. Quite a few people don't like this race. There are some among the customers. The girl they were discussing at that moment preferred to watch a fly flying over their heads. The guy didn't understand how these people could hate cat ears or such a cute race. He was clearly indignant. Listening to the compliments, the girl posed, taking cute poses. She clearly liked the compliments. She accepted the compliments in a sweet voice, repeating the guy's words. Kilfa was their ranger. She goes around the territory looking for traps and such. She also fights with a dagger and a bow. To demonstrate this, she took out a dagger and began to swing it. The squad leader standing behind her became worried about this. The guy thought she was amazing. She laughed, telling him he hadn't seen anything yet. The leader, apparently wanting to tease her, said she was the best at running away. The girl protested, asking him not to say that. At that moment, Leroy suggested that they leave right away. He asked the guy if he had time to prepare and gather his resolve, and he convincingly replied that he agreed. They all moved forward, considering his answer good. They had to leave for the western forest immediately, at this time in the city. Aina walked between the shops. Opening the door to one of them, she went inside. Inside, a man was sitting on a chair, and seeing the girl, he seemed to recognize her. He reached his hand towards her face and said that, as he promised, he would do something. The fair-haired man, a warrior monk named Rolf, was looking to the side. His eyes narrowed, and the sorceress, Niska, the ranger, Kilfa, and the warrior, Lyra, were looking in the same direction. There is a dense forest around. On the edge of this forest, you can see mountains, above which only the sky. The protagonist thought that his travels with these experienced adventurers are over. He hopes that this group is safe. 4 adventurers and the main character, Shiro, are moving along a forest path. Rolf, Shiro, and Lyra were carrying large backpacks on their backs. The girls were walking without things. Lyra turns to Shiro and says that Shiro can relax. They will try to avoid monsters if possible. Shiro thanks the guys for this. Kilfa walked in front. She had ears and a tail. Lyra walked and asked that they couldn't just find them. Kilfu looked towards Lyra and said that if he meant herbs, she had already collected them. Rolf intervened and said that they were looking for high-grade herbs, as it was a guild order. The sorceress was the shortest of those present. She was wearing a hat. She agreed with the boys and added that it would soon be dark. Lyra lowered his head and sighed. Lyra stopped, extended his hand forward, and said that it was time to stop. Kilfa stood with her back turned towards the stopped boys. Shiro was surprised that it was time to stop. Lyra raised his finger and said that one should allow oneself to rest. This rule has been followed since ancient times. Shino thought with tears in his eyes that he had been waiting for these words from his boss at his previous job. The guys decided to prepare everything for the camp. Rolf, sitting opposite Shiro, said that they were grateful to Shiro. Shiro replied that he was grateful to them for using those very matches. Lyra sat next to Rolf and looked at him. Lyra turned to Rolf and said with a smile that Rolf could make a lot of money if he sold these matches in the royal capital. Rolf approached Lyra. Rolf said with a smile on his face that if the infamous Merchant Association found out about this, Shiro would have problems. Lyra pointed a finger at Rolf and said that his predictions are always true. 12. Niska came up to Lyra, holding her stomach with her hand and saying that she was hungry. Lyra turned to her and said that they had been traveling all day, and now it was time for a snack. Niska sat down not far from the boys. She had bread in her hands. Shiro was sitting on his knees next to her and looking in the direction where Niska sat down. Shiro scratched his chin. He looked at Niska, who was eating a bun. He thought that dried meat in a stale bun Such a simple dish is included in the diet of even adventurers who are mainly in the wild. Kilfa was sitting with her back to Shiro. She turned to him. She held a piece of meat in her hands. She asked Shiro if he had any food. Shiro was surprised by her question. Kilfa holds a piece of meat in her hands and tears off a piece with her teeth. One piece remains in her mouth. The second she holds out forward and offers it to Shiro. Shiro starts rummaging through his bag and says that he doesn't need food. He brought some with him. Kilf is sitting nearby and impatiently waiting and watching what Shiro is looking for. Lyra passes by. He is also interested in Shiro's search for something. Lyra sees something that surprises him greatly. The other boys are blinded by the light. They are surprised and do not understand what Shiro took out of the bag. The boys saw many packs and boxes of food. Lyra and Kilfa hovered over Shiro. Neska sat next to him. Lyra asked Shiro that he intended to eat it all himself. Shiro looked at Lyra and replied that he had taken all of this out for everyone to eat. The guys looked at Shiro in surprise. They didn't understand what was happening. Shiro pointed to all the variety of food lying on the ground and said that these products were new and the guys should give them their assessment. Neska, Rolf, Kilfa, and Lyra stood thoughtfully. Then they started to rejoice, and Lyra rushed forward. He waved his hand and said that everyone should start tasting the food. Kilfa was jumping with joy. Rolf was smiling. Neske was impatient. Lyra started eating noodles first. Lyra was delighted with the taste of the food. He liked it very much. Kilfa ate a rice cake and was delighted with it. Rolf also could not resist eating. Neska ate a chocolate bar. She was drooling. The boys sat around the fire and enjoyed their food. Shiro thought that all the boys really liked the food they tasted. Kilfa was lying on the ground with a happy face. Her belly was very swollen. She said that she had overeaten. Neska was sitting hugging a lot of chocolate bars. She said that she remembered the chocolate. It was very tasty. Rolf looked up, holding the cross in his hand, and said that this must be God's plan. The boys fell asleep. Kilfa curled up in a ball. Neska lay on the ground and raved about chocolate. Rolf leaned against a tree and fell asleep. Shiro sat with his arms wrapped around his legs. Lyra came up to him from behind and said that Shiro needed to go to bed. Lyra approached Shiro. Shiro looked at him. Lyra said that he and the guys could take care of the patrol themselves. Shiro looked at Lyra and said that he was not used to going to bed so early. Lyra sat down next to Shiro. Lyra turned to him and offered to talk. Shiro held a cup of water in his hands. He was surprised that adventurers weren't used to using sleeping bags. Lyra stood next to him and held a cloth in his hands. He said that it was most likely because it was heavy to carry around. Lyra covered the sleeping Nazca, who was gnawing on her finger. Lyra said that in winter it is so cold that you can freeze to death, and if you take more things with you, the load also increases. Shiro brings a mug of boiling water to his face. Lyra says that in moments like these, he wants to have the skill of interdimensional storage. Shiro spits out all the water that was in his mouth from what he heard. Shiro approaches Lyra and asks about the interdimensional storage. Lyra replies that Shiro is a merchant and should know about it. Lyra has heard that 1 in 10 or 100,000 possesses it. Lyra raises her finger and says that in the dungeon of one of the ancient civilizations, there should be a book with interdimensional storage skills. Shiro nervously thought that he had this book. Shiro looked to the side and asked Lyra how much it would be worth if it were found. Lyra didn't understand why Shiro was asking him about this, because Shiro was a merchant himself and should know the answer. Lyra said that if you put a few horse carriages in there, you can buy a noble mansion, so the price will be high. Shiro panicked at what he heard. Shiro stood up and said he was tired and wanted to sleep. Lyra said she would wake him up in the morning. He notices something strange behind Shiro and gets scared. Lyra takes out her sword and gets into a fighting stance. Shiro is standing behind him. He doesn't understand what's going on. Shiro asks what's going on. Lyra tells him to shut up. Lyra comes up to Rolf and shakes him with her hand. Lyra says that the guys need to wake up. Rolf, leaning against a tree, woke up. Kilfa was lying on the ground. A sting came over Lyr's face. He said he felt something coming towards them. They needed to prepare for battle. A monster was coming towards them. Someone's eye was looking at them from the bushes. A paw with claws came out from there. Neska continued to sleep. She was gnawing on her finger. Drooling was flowing from her mouth. She continued to dream about chocolate. Shiro walks up to Neska and touches her shoulder with his hand. He tries to wake her up and tell her that it's time for her to stop dreaming about chocolate. Neska opens her eyes slightly. Shiro continues to say that it looks like the situation is actually an emergency. Kilfa started sniffing the air. She smelled something. Lyra was standing with his back to her. He turned his head and asked if she could smell what it was. Kilfa ignored the question. She stood with her eyes closed and continued sniffing the air. The moon was shining on the forest. Kilfa broke the silence and said that she could not smell anything because the monster was going against the wind. Rolf said that in that case, they could be dealing with a different monster. Lyra stood next to Neska. She had a magic staff in her hands. He turned to her and said that she needed to hurry and prepare a magic attack. Lyra doesn't have time to finish what she wanted. Lyra stands in a fighting pose. He put his sword in front of him and shouted that of all the monsters on their way, they met the killer, the grizzly. Behind Lyra stood a frightened Neska. In front of them stood a huge bear. Shiro appears behind Lyra. He's amazed by the bear's large size. Lyra has a hysterical smile on his face. He says that silver-ranked adventurers like them can't handle the bear. It wants to escape. Rolf said that there would be no way to escape. The only one who could successfully leave this place is Kilfa, as she is a representative of the cat lynx. Kilfa stood nearby and looked at what was happening around. Kilfa happily said that she would not abandon the boys under any circumstances. Rolf turned to Kilfa and said that they could not win even if they fought back. Lyra still held his sword in front of him. The boys stood behind him. The bear started moving towards the boys. He had big paws with huge and sharp claws. Lyra looked at Rolf and asked what they should do in that case. Rolf calmly replied that one of them would have to be the bait. Lyra looked at the boys and thought about Rolf's offer. The boys stood motionless in front of Lyra. They were scared. Shiro thought that he would have to make a choice. The boys stood close to each other. Shiro thought about who was the best bait out of all the options. In his opinion, he was the best. Lyra came up behind Shiro and put his hand on his shoulder. He called Shiro's name. Shiro was scared and thought that Lyra called his name, so his reasoning was correct, that he was the most suitable for the role of bait. Lyra continued to hold his hand on Shiro's shoulder. Shiro at this time thought that when he saw the boys' faces turn pale after Lyra's words, they realized that he was talking about death. Shiro's face went pale, his eyes dimmed. He played Lyra's words in his head that Shiro would have to become bait. But Shiro was wrong in his assumption. Lyra moved his hand to the side and said that Shiro needed to run with Kilfa and Neska, and that he and Rolf would take care of everything. Shiro stood behind them, shocked by what he heard. Lyra picked up his sword and apologized to Rolf for this turn of events. Rolf said that they had been friends for a long time, so there was no need to worry about it. Shiro said the names of the men in fear. Neska stood behind Lyra and said that she also intended to fight with them. Lyra, without turning around, replied that she was too slow and would only get in the way. Neska looked away, her face serious. Lyra turned to Neska and smiled. He said that he wanted to look like a cool guy in the eyes of the girl he loved so much. He asked her to understand his actions. Neska pulled her hat down over her face and called Lyra a name, tears streaming from her eyes. Lyra and Rolf were in fighting poses. Lyra said that Rolf needed to get ready to use the spell and remember to pray. Lyra was serious, his sword raised high. He said that when he came out, the guys needed to immediately start running as far as possible. Kilfa was standing behind Lyra. She raised her hand up and pointed at something with her finger. She said that there was something behind. Lyra turns around. He is completely confused by what he sees. There was a noise around the boys. The birds flew up. Something scared them. The boys looked around. Their faces were full of horror. A bear was already standing in front of Lyra. Another huge bear appears in front of Neska, from the very direction they were supposed to run. Neska and Rolf are even more scared. One of the bears opens its mouth wide and starts to roar loudly. Lyra extended his hand in the direction he was facing and shouted that Kilf and Neska should prepare to escape. Rolf shouted that he and Lyra would hold off those bears. Neska said desperately that they would die today. There were huge bears standing in front and behind the boys. Shiro started rummaging through his bag. Some kind of weapon was visible at the bottom. He remembered his grandmother's words. She told him that no matter how terrible the situation is, you should never give up. Shiro throws something at one of the bears that is already hanging over him, which eventually reaches the bear and explodes in the area of its stomach. The guys' mouths are open in shock. They do not understand what Shiro did. Shiro rewinds and looks up. Shiro takes out and pulls out a spray can with a bear drawn on it. Shiro screams that the bear will regret ever showing up in front of them. Shiro starts to press the small spray can that the gas comes out of right into the bear's face. The full moon answered the tops of the forest. The boys were surrounded by large bears. Neska's eyes sparkled from under her raised hat. She said that they would die today. Shiro was wearing sneakers and standing on the ground without moving. In front of him stood a bear with huge and sharp claws on its paws. Lyra turned to Shiro in fear and called his name. Shiro approached one of the bears, which was twice his height. Lyra looked at Shiro with fear and said that he needed to hurry and run away. Behind Shiro, he lifts his leg to get a better swing. Shiro throws something towards the bear with a serious face. The bear stands still and watches as something flies towards him. It was the lighting of fireworks. Bright explosions occur in front of the bear. He does not understand what is happening and is very scared. The bear starts to jump back, and Shiro continues to throw burning fireworks at it. Shiro continues to move towards the bear, thinking that he will continue to scare it with exploding fireworks. The boys gaped at what they saw. They didn't understand what Shiro was doing. Meanwhile, Shiro, with a serious face, shouted at the bear that he would regret appearing in his and the boys' way. Shiro then takes out a small dark canister and sprays it into the bear's face. Shiro shouts the word, "Fire." The bear, meanwhile, lifts his muzzle up and begins to growl loudly. He grabs his eyes with his paws and falls to the ground, continuing to growl. The second bear instantly appears behind Shiro. Lyra sees this and is very scared for Shiro. He starts screaming that another bear has appeared behind Shiro. The bear hangs over Shiro and wants to embrace him with its clawed paws. Shiro senses danger behind him. He turns sharply and sprays the bear's face, which was a few centimeters away from him. The bear is terrified, falls onto the fence and begins to roll around and grab his face. Shiro starts to examine his spray can. Shiro is surprised that the spray can was quite effective. He wondered if this was the last strike against the bears. Lyra appears behind Shiro and asks if Shiro used some kind of magic on the bears or something like magic. Shiro turns around. He still has the can in his hands. Shiro said that this is not magic at all. He invites the guys to look at his device. Shiro showed the canister and said that it contained poisonous gas. They needed to aim and press. The canister was dark in color and had a sticker on it with a picture of a bear with different hieroglyphs. Lyra stared at the canister and said that it contained poisonous gas. He didn't understand anything. Shiro started to walk away from the guys. He turned a little and said that it was time for them to leave here while they had the chance. Lyra waved his hand and asked them to wait. The boys looked at one of the bears, who was moaning and covering his eyes with his paws, and continued to roll on the ground. Lyra asked what this gas is in the eyes and nose of the bear, isn't it? Lyra's eyes sparkled. An idea came over him. He said that since this had happened, adventurers like them should not miss such a chance. The bear heard Lyra's words. He removed his paws from his muzzle and tensed up, expecting something ominous. Kilf's face lit up. Her mouth opened slightly. Several daggers appeared in her hands. She understood everything. Rolf stood with a serious face. Behind his back was a sharp spear. Neska conjured a shield and thought that they needed revenge. The dark sky hung over the forest. The noise spread. The sun rose. The morning was dawning. The boys defeated the bears. They were pierced by the sword and other weapons. Lyra sat astride the bears. The boys stood nearby and rejoiced. 2. Two bears are lying on top of each other. Lyra jumps down to the ground to Neska and says that they need to hurry and gut the bears. She replied that it would be too much trouble. Shiro looked at the guys and reminded them of Lyra's declaration of love to Neska. Lyra and Neska blushed and perked up at what they heard. They were very embarrassed by the confession that had happened. Lyra and Neska stood next to each other. He looked up and said he had no idea what Shiro was talking about. Neska stood and looked at Lyra. Lyra recalls the events that happened that night and says that Lyra said something about the girl he loves so much. Lyra replied that the first thing they should do is gut the bears and not discuss this topic. Neska stood in front of Lyra and looked at him. He scratched his head and looked away. They were considering how much they could sell the parts of the bears they had defeated. The boys gathered around one bear and began to spend it. Rolf gave everyone instructions. Lyra opened the skin in the right place. Nesca collected and froze the bear's blood, and Kilfa worked on the fangs. Lyra squatted down by one of the bear's paws and said that the skin had been removed, and now it was the claw's turn. Kilfa pointed to one of the bear's parts, and she asked what to do with the bear's genitals. Rolf sat down opposite Kilf and said that the organs were important for medical purposes and they needed to be taken too. Kilf, holding a knife, continued cutting off parts of the bear. Shiro took the bottom of the jacket in his hands and pulled it down. He was scared. Lyra stood with his arms crossed and looked at the two bears, one lying on top of the other with his belly cut open. Lyra said that they had to stop there as they couldn't take anything else with them. Lyra looks at Shiro and asks him to listen. Shiro looked at Lyra. He was interested in his appeal. Lyra stood in front of Shiro and said that Shiro would not mind if they postponed the task and returned to the city for a while. Shiro and Lyra stood opposite each other, the bear lying next to them. Lyra said that Shiro most likely wanted to sell the bear parts before they spoiled, especially since they were much more valuable than the herbs they were looking for. Lyra pointed to the side. Lyra pointed at the bear and said that half of this bear was Shiro's share. Shiro was stunned by such a large share. Lyra squatted down and picked up a canister from the ground. He took it in his hands and said that without Shiro's help, they would have died. Lyra was interested in how much the canister he was holding in his hands cost. Shiro started scratching his head with his hand and said that there is no need to think and evaluate someone's life and money. Lyra and Kilf looked at Shiro in surprise. Then Lyra smiled, closed his eyes, and said that Shiro was very good. Kilfa's face darkened and she thought about it. She put her hands to her chest. The next moment, she joyfully raises her hands up and jumps toward Shiro, shouting that he is a good person and she loves him very much. Shiro was shocked by Kilfa's action. Kilfa flies with her arms outstretched toward Shiro. He is scared. Shiro shortens from Kilfa's embrace. She hangs in the air and clasps her arms. She then falls into the bushes and sticks out of them with her feet up. Shiro and Nesca watch Kilfa. Nesca said with a smile on her face that she also had the same opinion as the guys. She thought Shiro was a good person. Rolf joined the conversation with a smile on his face. He said that if all merchants were like Shiro, the world would be a better place. Shiro was embarrassed by the praise from the guys. He awkwardly scratched the back of his head with his hand. He laughed and said that the guys were exaggerating. Shiro stood in front of Lyra and said that he understood in front of Lyra and said that he understood why the guys wanted to return to the city. Lyra turned to Shiro with interest. The hero offered to help carry the bear. More precisely, its parts. Lyra was surprised and was about to refuse. Shiro conjured a magical portal with magical symbols in it. It was shaped like an eye. The boys stood and watched, their mouths open. They were shocked by what they saw. Shiro turned to the boys. A conjured portal was hanging in the air behind him. He said that he regretted not telling them about the portal right away. It was an interdimensional storage skill. Lyra nervously scratched the back of his head. One eye closed. The tree branches rustled, and Lyra said that Shiro had nothing to apologize for, since he had saved them earlier. Shiro took the bag from the ground in his hand. He put the backpack on himself. He turned to the guys and said that it was time for them to return to Ninovich. Lyra was surprised. He pointed his thumb back and said that if Shiro placed the bear's spatial storage in the boundary, they could continue their journey for high-quality herbs. Shiro smiled. He was surprised. In the dense forest, someone shouted that they found something. Shiro thought that his journey with the guys continued for 2 more days. Shiro and the guys walked along a small path through the field. The forest surrounded them on the side, and the mountains were visible in front. In the middle of the city street stood a little blonde girl. She was wearing a dress with big buttons. She raised her hand up and shouted that she was glad to see her brother Shiro home. Shiro approached the girl and they touched hands. Lyra was standing behind him. He asked that she was probably Shiro's daughter. Shiro smiled and stood next to the girl. He said that she helps him in his store. She stood in front of the guys with her hands down and smiled. Lyra stood in front of the girl. He introduced himself and greeted her. Shiro at this time thought that he gave Aina the keys to the store, but she was still waiting for him on the street. The boys approached the porch of the house. Kilfa was hanging in the air above the boys. They headed to the guild to finish the building. Lyra and Shiro enter the house, and Lyra says that they are back. They are met by a girl with ears on her head. She screamed in fear and begged that she needed a little more time and then she would be able to give all the money. The boys enter the room. Everything in it was covered with wood. In front of them, a girl is sitting on her knees, and in front of her is a man in a hat. Shiro thought that they had plans to help finish building the house. He was interested in what was happening here now. The fair-haired man with small glasses on his nose was furious and started shouting that Emily had been promising to pay him money for 6 months. But this time he was not going to give in. Emily cried and shouted back that she promised to definitely find the money at the end of the month and give it to him. Shiro and Lyra stood opposite each other, in front of them. Emily covered her ears with her hands so as not to hear what the man was saying to her. Shiro wondered who the man was. Lyra answered that he was most likely a materials merchant. Shiro rubbed his hand over his clothes in the chest area. He turned to the man and said that he was a merchant in his city and his name was Shiro. The man turned away from Emily and turned to Shiro. Shiro said with interest that he wanted to know the man's purpose for visiting Emily. Neska and Kilfa stood behind Shiro, listening attentively. The man's name was Gerald. He took off his hat, covered one eye, and said he was a materials merchant. Behind him, Kilfa bent over Neska's magical withering. Shiro and Gerald were talking. Emily was standing next to them. Neska was playing with Kilf. Shiro found out that Harold knew the guild leader who had run away. The guild had huge debts, so he lent them 10 gold. Emily's house was the collateral. The man hit the table next to the contract lying on the table, and Kilf was startled by the unexpectedness. He shouted that if his money was not returned, the building would become his property. There were no other buildings near the house. A path led to it. The house was surrounded by a village. The merchant continued to say that the house and land would barely cover the deposit. Perhaps the deposit could be covered if the merchant did sell the house and land. Gerald looked down on Emily and told her that she had to bring the title deeds. Dunduki put her index fingers together and said she didn't want to bring the documents. Gerald calmed down and asked where Emily got such loyalty to the man who abandoned her. He thought the best solution would be to just let him go 136. Emily hung her head down, her dark hair covering her face. Then she said that loyalty had nothing to do with it. Lyra, Shiro, and Rolf stood nearby and watched. Emily raised her ears and said that this was her place. This was her home and her refuge from the humans who despised her for being a beast. She had found her home, and she belonged to it, which she had found for the first time in all time. Emily said with a smile on her face that this place is filled with different memories, mostly good ones. She doesn't want to lose it. She remembered how she was caught, how they stroked her head on her face, how she cleaned the house and ran from bandits. Shiro stood next to her and looked past Emily, who was smiling. He stared and thought that this place was truly filled with memories. The sun was shining and illuminating the house surrounded by villages. Shiro recalled the events of 5 years ago. It was summer. He was sitting on a table on a wooden floor. A cicada was lying belly up next to his feet. Shiro stood on the veranda. Behind him was a woman. She asked him to listen to her. The woman with long bangs said that it had been 2 years since Mio's grandmother disappeared. Shiro didn't remember all the events of that day. But when he heard the woman's words, he was shocked. She said that she thought that now was the time to sell her grandmother's house. Shiro sat on his knees on the floor and lowered his head down. He bowed before the adults. He begged them not to sell the house. It was filled with memories of his grandmother. The adults were shocked by Shiro's actions. Shiro closed his eyes and kept his head on the floor. He was ashamed to do this in front of many relatives. Shiro silently took a few steps away from the boys. Lyra stood behind him and called Shiro. Shiro seemed not to hear his name being called. He simply went outside and stood at the door of the house. Gerald looked at Emily and said that it was all for personal reasons. But unfortunately, a contract is still a contract. Emily lowered her ears and said that she knew it. Lyra, Rolf, and Gerald were standing in the room and Emily came back to them. She handed them the contract and said that here is the title deed of Emily's guild building. Someone shouted that they had to wait. Emily shouted this as he entered the house and stretched out his hand, on which something was lying in front of him. Emily's eyes filled with tears. She called Shiro brother. Shiro said that Harold did not want to buy the bear's skin. Harold nervously approached Shiro and couldn't take his eyes off the skin. He didn't believe that it could actually be a bear skin. Harold said in shock that if he wasn't mistaken it was grizzly bear material, and judging by the color it was one of their exploits. Harold put his hand on his chest and said excitedly that he would like to buy this material. Shiro stood in front of him and said that he could not sell it because this material was for Emily. Emily and Harold were surprised by what they heard. Emily said in surprise that the guild couldn't pay. Shiro looked at Gerald, then he turned to Emily and said dismissively that they could pay later. Emily put her hand on her chest and called Shiro brother. Lyra closed his eyes and scratched the back of his head. He understood Shiro's intentions. Then he walked up to Emily and said that he and the guys had the same amount of material as Shiro. Lyra held out his hand in front of him and said that Emily could buy these materials and could give her the money later. Emily hesitated before answering, and a moment later, with a smile on her face, she agreed with the guy's proposal. Gerald approached Emily and said nervously that he wanted to buy all this material from her. He intended to buy it for 32 gold. Emily stuck out her tongue and said that she would agree to 36. Gerald was angry. Gerald held a lump in his hand and examined it. As a result, Gerald paid 26 gold, minus the debt. He also gave 2 gold for the bear's organs, and that made 28 gold for Emily. It was still daytime. The street was quiet. Gerald said it was time for him to go. He stood in the doorway of the house, a backpack on his back. He turned to the boys and said that he would like to make more of these tempting deals next time. Gerald opened the door and left. Emily watched the door close, and Lyra said that Gerald wanted Gensuke to continue to exist. Gensuke bowed low before Lyra. Tears were flowing from Emily's eyes. She said that the guys helped her a lot. She thanked them for it. The boys stood next to her and looked at her. Rolf said that if she wanted to thank someone, she should say it to Shiro. Lyra said that they did what adventurers are supposed to do. Lyra said that Emily should now process the rest of their order. Emily's tilted face darkened at the words. She said that it should be done now, while Shiro was here. Shiro stood next to her. Shiro pointed at himself and asked that he wasn't allowed to be here. Emily waved her hand and said that he had finished his business here and it was time for him to go home. Lyra stood nearby and watched the boys. Lyra said how she was going to handle an escort order without the target being protected. Emily nervously replied that wasn't it enough that she had exposed him to being in security. Lyra leaned towards Emily and said that her answer was too suspicious. It seemed to him that she wanted to reduce the rewards for them. Emily jumped and said that she could not do that. Lyra extended his hand forward and said that in that case, Shirtsuki should pay them 30 silver pieces. Shiro stood behind Lyra and didn't understand why 30. Lyra turned to him and said that it was too late to tell Emily about the discount. Emily stood in shock in front of the guys. Shiro said that he meant something else. Shiro said that he paid 100 silvers as payment for the order, but the remaining 70 was the final figure of what the guild could pay for. Lyra touched his chin with his hand. Shiro stood next to him and they thought about it. Emily stood in front of them. Emily started to walk away quietly. Lyra caught Emily and said that she shouldn't run away. It was time for her to explain everything to them. Neska conjured up some magic symbols and said she was ready to deal with Emily. Kilf smiled evilly and said that the Supreme Lila would punish Emily, then she became afraid. Rolf said angrily that they were not going to forgive her this time. Lyra clenched his fists and showed an angry face. He hung over Emily and said that God would punish her. Emily began to run away from the guys. She was very scared and asked them for forgiveness. Behind her were the angry guys. Emily flew out of the window of the house. Shiro thought that he was glad that he didn't take Aina with him. He thought about it when he saw a new side of Emily. It was a sunny day. Clouds were floating in the sky. There was silence around the 2-story house. Shiro entered the house and said that he was back. Aina noticed the stairs opposite Shiro. She was surprised by his return. Shiro stood opposite Aina. They stood next to the window. Shiro began his story from the moment when he and the guys went into the forest. Aina listened attentively to Shiro. Shiro raised his hand up and smiled. Then he raised his hand up and smiled. Then he raised his hands up and growled. Shiro then sighed in relief and said that these 3 days had been very stressful. Aina looked on in admiration. She put her hands to her chest and said that Shiro was amazing for being able to defeat a grizzly bear in such a way. Shiro was embarrassed. He smiled and scratched the back of his head with his hand. He said that the bear was defeated by the members of the Azure Flash, and he only helped them a little. The delighted hyena replied that if Shiro had not been next to them, they would not have been able to defeat the bear. Someone knocked on the door of the house. The stranger was looking for Shiro. Shiro looked towards the door in surprise. Shiro opened the door and asked who Karen was and what she wanted. A girl with braided hair stood in front of him. The girl rushed forward. Shiro's face was pressed tightly to her chest. He was very surprised by this. The girl hugged Shiro, who didn't understand anything, with tears in her eyes. Shiro looked at the girl's chest, which was pressed against his face. He couldn't say anything. He only mumbled incoherently. The girl held Shiro's head near her stomach and said that she heard that Shiro had run into a grizzly bear. Was he okay? Her eyes were filled with tears. Karen continued to hold Shiro's head. She asked if Shiro's larynx was damaged. Aina stood next to him and began to scream in panic that Shiro couldn't breathe. Karen needed to let him go. Shiro raised his hand up and started touching his mice. He said that the girls need to calm down, as he was protected by the Azure Flash and he was completely fine. Aina stood behind Shiro and Karen in front of him and said that she was glad to hear that everything was fine. Karen started to smile and asked how the trip went, whether Shiro managed to learn anything new and useful. Shiro answered that yes, it did. Shiro spread his arms out to the side and said that if he managed to stock up on food in time, the people who came to check would be shocked. With a smile and a laugh, Karen said that Shiro shouldn't hide it. She brought her lips close to his ear. Shiro stood motionless as Karen spoke into his ear, saying that he had a storage skill, or that he owned an item like that. Shiro looked nervously at Karen and said that he did not understand what she was talking about. The house was surrounded by forest. There was no one on the street. Karen continued to say that Shiro did not know how to lie. She had already met people who had this skill before him. 86. With a smile on her face, Karen continued to say that she immediately understood Shiro's skill. He smelled the same as the other people she met. Shiro swallowed nervously. Then he scratched the back of his head with his hand and said that Karen was right. He asked that it was all because of a woman's intuition, wasn't it? Karen looked at Shiro calmly and said that he was wrong. He just fell for her trick. She assumed that this was the case, since Shiro had stocked up on a huge number of matches. As Shiro thought, silence hung in the air. A sickle appeared between the boys. Then Giri jumped nervously and Karen began to smile. Karen put her hand on Shiro's shoulder and said that he should take note, though it wouldn't help him in trading. Shiro was a little confused. He said that he was outplayed. Next time and in the following times he will be careful. Karen asked with a smile what Shiro was planning to sell. Aina was standing nearby. She was also interested in knowing. Shiro waved at the backpack and said that he was planning to sell this. Shiro, Karen, and Aina looked at the floor. Karina got nervous. She was surprised and said that it turns out that such things do exist. Shiro stretched his arms up and smiled. He said that his first day of business ended quite well. The bell on the door rang and Lyra and Neska entered the house. Lyra raised his hand above his head and asked how things were going. Shiro greeted Lyra. Neska came out from behind Lyra. She waved to the boys, and Shiro greeted her too. Lyra addressed to Shiro. He said that he has a good habit to arrange goods neatly. Shiro said that it is Aina's merit. So how does Kona do these? She said with a smile on her face that after that incident with the grizzly bear, Lyra and Neska stood next to each other. Neska touched Lyra's hand. He looked in her direction. The guys started dating. Lyra said that he heard from Amy that someone important from the guild was planning to come to the city. Shiro replied that it was true. Lyra continued saying that everything was clear now. He just wanted the best guild to open a branch here. Shiro was surprised. He asked Lyra if there were other guilds. Lyra replied that of course there are, but many of them have a bad reputation. Lyra began to present various amulets with bones and said that there are such guilds as the Tridents of Argument, the Fang of the Devil Dragon, but the worst of them is. Lyra covers Nesk and says that the worst of them all is the Marauder's Labyrinth. Lyra looked towards Nesk. Aina was worried. Aina brought her hands to her body and said that she once heard the mayor talking about them. She talked about the Marauder's Labyrinth. Aina thought about it. The guys stood silently and looked at each other. Shiro asked worriedly, what could Karen know about the reputation of this guild? Lyra replied worriedly that he didn't know for sure, but he couldn't rule it out. The boys stood opposite each other. Lyra stretched out his hand in front and said that maybe the reputation of this guild is terrible only among adventurers and can only be in their area. Shiro answered that everything is possible. A small town with low houses. It wasn't the world with phones. Something like that is normal here. But the Adventurers Guild with a worse reputation would head to this place. Karen sat at the table and wrote with a quill. Aina was holding a broom in her hands. She turned around and said that the chairman had been gone for a long time. Maybe he got lost. Shiro's hands were on the table. He lay down on them, his eyes were barely open, and he said that the chairman was definitely in no hurry, even from the neighboring city to walk to them. Shiro continued to say that Karen had been waiting for him at the entrance to the city since yesterday. Karen was frowning and pacing. It was getting dark outside. Shiro said that he, like everyone else, would like the chairman to be here. The big bell rang. Shiro said that the evening bell rang and Aina's shift was over today. He praised her for her good work. Aina waved. Shiro left the house and said goodbye to Aina. Shiro left the house and said goodbye to Aina. Shiro took the key and said that it was still early, but he would close the store. Someone came to the door of the shop and started knocking. Shiro was on the inside of the door. He was holding the key in his hands. He flinched from the unexpected knock. The door opened and a girl with long hair and weapons on the sides of her suit walked in. She smiled and apologized for disturbing us at such a late hour. The girl smiled and wore a hat and asked if she could inspect the goods in Shiro's shop. Shiro offered the girl various things. She looked at everything with interest. Shiro offered her the thing that the adventurers praised, and this one even surprised Karen. There was a bookcase behind the guys. She said that she had heard stories about matches. It was an incredible invention. She noticed the silver thing. The hero replied that it was a space blanket to keep warm. Shiro suggested that she try it. The adventurers appreciated this innovation and even Karen-san praised Shiro. The girl threw a cape over herself. She blushed, closed her eyes, and said that it was an amazing thing. It was so warm, although very thin. The girl took the elongated object. It interested her. Shiro answered that it was a collapsible water bottle. The girl was already standing at the door. She smiled and said that she was grateful to Shiro for explaining about the goods, but she was in a hurry and it was time for her to go. The girl left the house. Shiro looked at her and thought that what was the reason for her being in such a hurry? There were trees and mountains above the roof of the houses. Several days passed. Aina ran down the street towards the house and called Shiro. Aina went into the house. She tried to catch her breath and said that everything was bad. Shiro asked what happened. Karen looked back at the man passing by. The man had a large round pendant around his neck, and he turned to her and said that she was the mayor of the city. This man had not long arrived in the city. The boys ran holding hands. Aina told the plan they were trying to stick to. The boys were supposed to meet this man who came for a check. Then Karen would take him around the city and the market. Their plan changed. Aina said that Karen asked to bring Shiro to Emily's house as soon as possible. Karen also looked toward Shiro. She was very serious. There was a man standing next to her. His back turned. The mayor said that this is a rather grumpy person and the hero should be as polite as possible. The young man replied that he is already used to rudeness, so he will not give in to provocations. Regardless of the criticality of the situation, Karen introduced Shiro as the best merchant in town. Shiro said that he was incredibly happy to meet her. Aina said that she also worked in the store. The man's face was not visible. It was covered by a hat. She said that he expected a lot because he heard that Shiro was a skilled merchant. The man looked at Ain and Shiro and began to call them names. The man ran his finger across the table and said that the guild building was dirty. He thought that demi-humans knew how to clean houses. Emily's ears perked up. She was very angry at the man's words and shouted that she cleaned everything until it sparkled every day. The man laughed. Karen was standing in front of him. He said that Emily must have gotten it wrong. She was making a mess in the house, not cleaning. Karen began to get angry at the man's ugly behavior. The man continued. He said that half-humans are incapable of working. It's a waste of time. A sinister grin appeared on Kilfa's face. Karen held an angry Emily and said that they should move on to a more important conversation. Would Gabestino like to look at the goods that Shiro was selling? A match lit up in front of Gabestino. He looked at it in surprise. He said that these were the same matches that everyone was talking about. Gabasdino blew out the match, and looking at the smiling Karen said that now, everything was clear to him. The quality of the goods was good. Gabasdino threw the match on the floor and sat down on a chair. Sprawled on the chair, he said that the labyrinth of marauders opens its branch at the guys. Karen was surprised by this news. The man said that they have several conditions. Gabasdino stretched out his hand forward. On 4 of the 5 fingers there were rings. There was a gloomy atmosphere around him. He said that the first condition was that the Marauders' Labyrinth would be the only guild in the city. Gabasdino raised his index finger up and continued to say that Gensuke's guild was not needed here and needed to be closed. Gensuke stood next to him and looked at him. Emily was furious. Karen was holding her tightly. Gabasdino said that the branch would be exempt from taxes since they would not be able to earn anything. The guys would have to cover the costs of maintaining the building. Gabasdino smiled ominously, then put the books on the table and said that he would like to be the only one with the right to sell matches. Shiro looked at him emotionlessly. He did not understand what Gabasdino was talking about. Gabasdino began to show strange hand gestures and said that Shiro was slow-witted for a merchant. Gabasdino sweatily approached Shiro's face and said that now he and his guild will buy Shiro's matches. Shiro continued to look at the man with indifference. Karen came up behind him and said that Gabasdino needed to wait. He turned to her and said that she shouldn't interrupt the conversation between him and Shiro. The man continued to insult Shiro. Karina said that Gabasdino would help in the growth of her city, but to ask for the right to sell matches was too much. Gabasdino replied that she did not understand anything, but he was ready to explain everything to her. Gabasdino stood with a pointer. There was a map around him. He explained that the amount of goods for the road was limited from the border town. What could happen if he and his guild with many branches would buy up all the goods? Gabasdino laughed evilly, drooling, and said that if the guys sold them matches, they would be distributed throughout the country and the guild's profit would increase so much that the guys had never even dreamed of such figures. Shiro thought about it and said that the man's offer was tempting, but he would probably refuse since there was a limit on the number of matches he could sell. The man was shocked by Shiro's refusal. Karen sat down behind the man and said that if these were his demands, then Karen had to start the negotiations from the beginning. The man was stunned into silence. The man went berserk. He grabbed the balik and threw it towards Karen. He shouted that the guys didn't understand why he came to their remote town. He found only ungrateful people like them there. Lyra stood there barely holding back. Shiro stood behind the man and said that in the western forest, Gabasdino could find monsters, healing herbs, and many other things, so it was worth opening a branch of their guild. There were even adventurers who used the city as a base. The man turned to Shiro. He was surprised. He grabbed Shiro by the tie and laughed loudly. He pulled Shiro by the tie. Gabasdino started shouting in Shiro's face that he insulted the city's residents, since they came to the city only because they couldn't get rich in the capital and the guys can only justify the losers of this city, since they are the same. Neska was full of anger, armed with her magic staff. Next to her was Lyra. Lyra's face became angry. A dark aura appeared around him. The man continued to mock. He said that the value of this building they were in was negligible. Karen and Emily looked at the man angrily. Gabasdino laughed and continued to say that if they opened a branch here, this miserable city could still prosper. Shiro continued to show no emotion. The man said that the future depended on Shiro's further actions. Shiro replied that he needed time to think. The woman said that the decision should not be made quickly. Gabasdino's face took on a strange expression. He began to point at Ein and said that if Shiro decided to cooperate with the guild, he was ready to hire someone better than Ein. Ein looked at the man with fear. Shiro was shocked by what he heard. Horror was reflected on Shiro's face. He did not understand what Gabasdino meant. The man laughingly said that he could find a better candidate. The man called the city residents names. A moment later, Shiro hits the man in the face with all his might, sending the man's hat flying off. The man falls to the floor, drooling as Shiro screams that Gabasdino should never return to their city again, calling him worthless. Shiro looked ahead. He had a frightened look. He thought that the report had started. Shiro had already remembered this situation. He thought that it was the beginning of something bad. Shiro and Ainet were standing next to each other. In front of them was the guild representative. Shiro had flashbacks to the day he quit his fourth job. There was another employee standing next to Shiro and an angry boss standing in front of them. The man in glasses and a suit was saying something, but Shiro didn't hear it. He was thinking about how at that time he was pissed off by his boss, who started picking on him, whom Shiro respected with all his heart. The countdown began from the number 3. Shiro saw the face of the guild representative. He saw in it a resemblance to his former boss. The representative called Ain names. Then the number 2 appeared. Shiro stared at one point. The number 1 appeared, and it was as if something clicked in his head. The windows of the house appeared, and Shiro shouted that the representative should not appear in this house. Shiro makes a furious punch. The guild representative flies away. He shouts something unintelligible, and Shiro calls him names in response. The guy stood and looked at Shiro. Emily had hearts in her eyes, Kilf. Neska and Lyra smiled nervously. Karen came up to Shiro. She called him. Shiro answered that he hoped that this guy did not do anything indecent to Karen. Karen was surprised by Shiro's words. She answered negatively. Shiro continued to stand and look at Karen. Karen blushed and hugged her stomach and said that the guild representative had touched her after all. After Karen's words, Shiro became furious and looked away angrily. The guild representative Shiro was grabbed by the hair with his hand. A ring was on his index finger. The man was screaming from what was happening to him. Karen tried to calm Shiro down. She said that he should stop. Rolf was standing next to him. His face was frowning. The man was shouting nasty things at Shiro. Rolf shouted Shiro's name. Karen was standing next to him and was scared because it happened so suddenly. Shiro was dragging the man by his hair. Shiro was dragging the man by his hair. Rolf, with a calm expression on his face, offered to help Shiro. Shiro turned around completely. He agreed to help. Shiro climbed onto the table. Rolf was held on the shoulder of the man. Shiro recalled that he remembered well the time when he decided to quit. The man was upside down screaming and did not understand what they wanted to do to him. Shiro recalled the forbidden special move that brought the case to court in time using it on his former boss. Shiro used his special free gift called a soldier. They landed on the floor with a thud, the man's head breaking the wooden boards that covered the floor. The man was sticking out of the floor upside down, twitching periodically. Shiro stood motionless, his head slightly lowered. Shiro said without raising her head that he was against bad actions. But if someone dared to say something bad about his friends... Aina looked at Shiro in surprise, her eyes watering, and Karen covered her mouth with her hands in embarrassment. Shiro approached the man sticking out of the floor and shouted furiously that he would not remain silent and listen to nasty things about his friends. Aina ran to Shiro. He was surprised by her action. Aina hugged Shiro and called him her brother. The guild representative jumped to his feet and screamed that Shiro could do something like that. The man's mouth grinned and foam started to flow. He said that Shiro wouldn't get away with it that easily. He would remember those words. Shiro hugged Aina. The representative continued to shout that he was the representative of the Labyrinth Marauders Guild. For what Shiro did to him, he and the entire city would pay. The man was furious. Karen approached the man and told him if she could consider his words as a provocation to war against her city. The man was frightened by the words he heard. Karen continued to say with a creepy grin that as the mayor of this city, she must inform Margrave Basher, who rules these lands, about this. The man, foaming at the mouth, said that the boys had misunderstood everything. He wanted to say something completely different if the boys gave him the primary right to the matches. Then this incident would be forgotten. Before he could finish speaking, he was grabbed by the ear. Shiro grabbed the man by the ear and said menacingly that the man had poor hearing and that he should listen to them carefully and remember their words. Karen and the guard stood behind Shiro. He said that he had no intention of making a deal with him, and if adventurers like this man entered his shop, Shiro would throw them out without hesitation. The man crawled to the door in fear. Shiro shouted after him, asking if he understood everything. The man bowed sitting by the door and said that he would buy the matches for any price Shiro named. Shiro closed one eye and said that he intended to continue selling matches at retail. The man looked from Shiro to Karen. He said that in that case they had finished talking about matches. The man held his hand out in front of him and said angrily that they should discuss opening a branch in the city. Karen interrupted him, covering her eyes and saying that it seemed the representative had not realized that there would be no deal. Lyra stood nearby and began to laugh loudly. Karen and the man turned around at the laughter. Lyra could hardly contain his laughter. He pointed his finger and said that the man was so stupid since he was busy eating and did not realize the failure of both deals. The man began to shout, so much so that drool flowed from his mouth. He said that Lyra should be silent, since Lyra was just a poor excuse for an adventurer. After these words, Lyra grabs the man by the throat. He lifts him up and says that all the time Lyra sat quietly and did not say anything. Lyra wanted to know what the representative meant. Lyra held the man off the ground. Shiro extended his hand forward and said that a bad move was a no-go. Lyra responded that Shiro himself had just used that bad move on the representative. Lyra lets go of the man and gives him a kick. Then he said that there is no point in fighting him, the man should leave this place. Lyra shows her middle finger and says that the man should return to his beautiful capital. The man crawls towards the door. Lyra was angry. He said he couldn't calm down. Emily was standing next to him. She was also furious, and Rolf. The atmosphere around them was frightening. Karen said that they should forget about this guild representative, and that the guy shouldn't tarnish their reputation because of people like him. Shiro looked at Karen, and she looked back at him. There was a knock at the door. Lyra looked towards the door. Lyra went towards the door and began to stretch his hand. He said that this man does not learn anything. In that case, he should be taught a good lesson. Then Lyra opened the door and was surprised. There was a girl standing in front of him. The girl smiled and said that she was sorry for disturbing him. She came here as soon as she heard that the mayor was here. She bowed her head. Shiro looked at the girl in surprise and remembered how she had already come to his store and asked about matches. The girl came into the store. Karen came up to her and said that she was the mayor of this city. She was interested in who this girl was. The girl stood in front of all the guys, and then she said that her name was Nei Mirage. She was the ambassador of the Fairy's Blessing Guild. Lyra whistled. He turned towards Shiro, but did not take his eyes off the girl and said that isn't this the largest guild in their country. Karen asked with a serious face what the girl wanted to discuss with her. The girl with a smile on her face said that it was an obvious question. The girl held a scroll in her hands and said with a smile that she came here to ask for permission for the Fairy Blessing Guild to open a branch in his city. Nei stood dressed in an unusual costume. On her head was a hat. On the sides of her waist on the belt were seen 2 swords. Nei stood in front of the guys. They looked at her with surprise and suspicion. Karen said that Nei wants to open a branch of the Fairy Blessing in their city. Emily stood next to Shiro and shouted suspiciously that it must be a trap. Karen looked towards Emily in surprise. Nei closed one eye, and at that very moment ran up to Emily and took her hand. She said that Emily was also a representative of the guild, and there was something to talk about with her too. Nei approached Emily's face and said suspiciously that if this guild became their branch, Nei suddenly raised her hand and cheerfully said that Emily's salary would increase so much. Emily looked up at Nei's hand with her mouth open. She asked that the payment would increase so much. Nei closed her eyes and dropped her hand forward. She said that at least the payment would increase 5 times more than it is now. There was a stomping sound. Emily ran away from Naya. It happened incredibly quickly. Emily was on all fours with a scary face. She thought that from today onwards, the Silver Moon would become the Fairy's Blessing branch. Emily wrapped her arms around Nia's leg and said that she agreed to make this decision. This kind of chance could only happen once in a lifetime. Shiro replied that they needed to listen and see everything. There was not a soul around the house. Shiro continued to say that the rest of the day could be spent in his office. Clouds were flying over the houses. Cups of tea were on the table. Next to it was a chessboard, at which Karen, Nei, and Shiro were sitting. Shiro asked why Nei should open a branch in their city. Nei closed her eyes and said that the other day, a group of adventurers from the guild discovered a map of ancient magical civilizations and mysterious continents in a dungeon. Nei held the unfolded map in her hands. Then Nei sat back down at the table and said that it was strange that they hadn't been discovered earlier, but the guild considered it the great discovery of the century. Nia looked straight at the guys, and they listened carefully to her conversation. She said that the most important thing from this map is right here, where the guys are. Nei hit the table on which the map lay, and said seriously that to the great forest to the east of Ninrik, she realized that the kingdom of ancient civilizations, temples, labyrinths, and many other creatures in great numbers. Karen jumped up, her eyes sparkling, and said that it was definitely true and what it could mean. Nay pointed her finger at the map with the figures of armed monsters. She said that the reason why the Labyrinth Marauders wanted to open a branch here was because they wanted to monopolize the traces, the possession of information. Nay dropped one of the figurines and laughing, she said that as usual, they were denied funding. She moved the fairy figurine and said that they decided to channel the power and strike at the capture of the noble trace. Nay's mouth dropped open and she raised her hand as she continued to say that they had determined that Ninrik would be the perfect base to take over. Shiro looked at Nay in surprise. She looked at the figurine with ears and a spear and said that in the city, there is only one guild. Silver Moon. A figurine with a spear and a fairy stood on the map. Nay said that if they became a branch, there would be no need to build a new house for the guild, and they could start working on it right away. Nai said that there was another reason, the existence of Shiro's shop in the city. Shiro was surprised by her words. Nai smiled and closed her eyes. Nai remembered going to the store and said that all the goods in the store were wonderful. She was sure that it could help adventurers. Ni rose from her chair and said that the guys should consider placing her guild in their city. Karen thought about it, and with a serious face said what conditions the guild plans to put forward for placing them in the city. Nay was surprised by what Karen said. She leaned towards the guys. Shiro smiled and Karen nervously closed her eyes. The guys told about the man from the Marauders Guild. Nay put the cup on the table and shouted that it was impudence. That is, she can not only create a branch, but also make demands. Shiro and Karen stared at Nay. Shiro smiled and Karen crossed her arms as they talked about the horrible behavior of the man who called them names. Nay said that now she understood what the guys were talking about. She went to the sofa where the guys were sitting. She said that the guys can be sure that if they agree to open a branch, then there will be no need to build a guild house. Nay approached Karen and said that she would like to ask for labor to build a hostel where adventurers would live and secure the land for them, for a fee. Karen touched her chin with her hand, then extended her hand to Nay and said that they had agreed. Nay beamed with joy. She grabbed Karen's hand and expressed her gratitude for her agreement. Emily stood on the roof of her house and shouted that 5 times more. Thus, Silver Moon became a branch of the Blessing of the Fairies, the #1 guild in the country. Clouds floated over the house and several days passed. Shiro thanked the customer for his purchase while sitting at the table. Aina stood lost in front of the door. Shiro got up from the table and called her. Shiro pointed to the side and said that Ina should hand him a large pack of matches. Aina stood motionless, not paying attention to Shiro. Shiro was surprised and called her name again. Shiro came close. He leaned towards Aina and called her. She woke up and with a smile on her face asked Shiro if he needed a broom. Shiro said that he needed big matches. Aina went to get them. She was standing at the table in front of the shelves with goods. Shiro asked her to clean up the store. Shiro asked Aina in surprise that everything was okay with her. Lately she often had her head in the clouds. She responded and said that everything was fine. Shiro was counting coins and decided to talk to Aina about the situation. Shiro was stretching on his chair. Aina called him. He turned to her. Aina was dejected. She hung her head and did not know how to tell him. She clenched her fist. Her heart was beating wildly. Shiro waited for Aina to ask a question. She screamed and fell to her knees with such force that the coins began to fall. Shiro jumped up from his chair. Aina had tears in her eyes and was on all fours. Then she covered her face with her hand and said that Shiro could lend her some money. The coins were scattered on the floor. Shiro was sitting next to Aina. He smiled and said how much money she needed to give. She apologized through tears. Aina cried, wiped her tears with her hand and said that she did not want to cause trouble for Shiro. Shiro looked at her and started stroking her head. He said that everything was okay. She didn't need to think about it. Shiro stood crouched and stroked Aina's head. He said that she had better gather courage and bravery. She pressed her hands to herself in embarrassment. Aina continued to cry while Shiro stroked her head. Shiro looked at her and said that he could assume that something had happened to Erase's mother. Aina raised her head in surprise. There was a door behind Shiro. He said that Aina could tell him everything. He would help. Lyra and Kilfa came into the store. He offered Shiro to have dinner together. Shiro turned around. Lyra was surprised to see Aina crying. Lyra asked if he had disturbed the guys. Karen burst into the store. She said that she wanted to know Shiro's opinion on the development of the city, but she felt that now was not the time for such a conversation. Lyra turned to the exit and said that she would return later. Shiro leaned over to Aina and said that the guys had offered their options. He was interested in what Aina wanted. She rubbed her face with her hand and said that it was okay, the guys could stay. The guys were standing next to her. Shiro turned around and said that it would be better if they also listened to what happened and tried to solve the problem. Lyra looked at Rolf and said that they were staying. Karen said that she also wanted to help Aina. Aina covered her face with her hand. Shiro looked at her and said that he wanted to be her support and listen to her. Aina rubbed her eyes with her hand. The guys were standing in front of her. She started saying that her mother was sick. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, in a room with an open window, a woman was sitting on a bed and crying. A bouquet of flowers stood on the windowsill of the open window. One petal had fallen. Aina remembered how she lived with her parents. If they were at the dinner table, another chair was occupied by Aina's toy. Everyone laughed and were happy. Until one moment. The city where Aina and her family lived burned down during the war. Behind the high walls of the city, soldiers stood with spears, while inside the houses were burning. Mom hugged Ain. She could not stop looking at the remains of their once-burned house and her favorite toys. Aina's dad was crawling around the grieving house looking for something. He found her favorite bear and gave it to her. She took it with tears of joy. Dad, with a smile on his face, stroked Ain's head, turned around, and left. He said that he would be back soon. Mom hugged Ain, and they watched their father leave. Father was taken into the soldiers, as it was everyone's duty. Mom comes into the tent. Aina was sitting, covering her ears with her hands when she was 6 years old. Her mother suggested moving to another city. Aina refused, because if they move, Dad won't be able to find them. Aina's mother stood and looked at her with a backpack on her back. The next moment, Aina's mother was having lunch. A teddy bear was lying next to her. Aina's mother didn't say anything. She just hugged her and started crying. Aina holds her mother's hand. After some time, they left the city. Passing many cities, they arrived in Ninrish. Aina and her mother continued walking. Aina looked at everything with curiosity, and her mother smiled. Aina asked her mother why she chose this city. She answered that there was no war there, and she did not want to lose another loved one. Living far from the city was hard. Ain's mother had to work a lot, sometimes go hungry to feed Ain. After some time, Faina's mother fell ill. She was lying in bed. Faina was next to her. Mom apologized to Aina for her illness. Aina held a toy bear in her hands and cried. She blamed herself for her mother's illness and cried alone. Aina held the toy bear in her hands and decided that she needed to grow up and be strong. She put the toy in a drawer, then began to preen it in the mirror. For a few copper coins, she received permission to trade at the market, and she stood from morning until evening and sold flowers. One day, she saw Shiro on the street of the city. He was carrying a large backpack. Aina called Shiro, and he turned around. They stood opposite each other. Shiro smiled and scratched his head with his hand. He not only bought the flower from Ain, but also accepted it. The boys said goodbye. Aina was jumping for joy. Aina came to the house and sat down on her knees in front of it and began to thank the gods for everything. Aina held a bag of money in her hands. It was her first salary, which amounted to 10 silver coins. She ran to the market and had already decided in advance how to spend it. She met an adventurer. He said that this potion cures all diseases. Aina gave her mother this potion to drink. Aina lied to her mother. She said that the potion was given to her by Shiro. But in fact, this adventurer took all the property. The potion stood half empty on the table. Mom drank the potion, but nothing changed. She continued to be ill. Aina's eyes darkened. She thought about her next steps. She realized that she needed a lot of money. Shiro's shop. She realized that if she had a lot of money, she could transfer her mother to the city hospital. They should help her there. Aina clenched her fists and thought that God might hate her, but he had to save her mother. Shiro was sitting on a chair. Aina called him. She stood next to Shiro. He was sitting at the table and counting coins and shouted that she wanted to borrow some money from him. Aina expected hatred and self-reproach. But Shiro stroked her head, which surprised her greatly. Shiro looked at Aina and smiled from. Fitz, she blushed. She bowed her head forward and cried. Aina was crying loudly. Shiro was standing in front of her. She thought that Shiro simply stroked her head in response to her request. Aina stood in front of the boys. There was a window behind her. Shiro looked at her, he said. This is how Aina's mother is. Aina stood with her head down. Lyra hits the wall with all his might. He shouted in rage that they need to find the person who sold the potion to Aina. Shiro looked at the angry Lyra. Lyra waved his arms and shouted that if he found that person, he would hit him many times. Neska stood next to him and told Lyra that he needed to stop smashing everything. Rolf leaned over to Aina and said that in his opinion, the potion that the stranger gave Aina was not real. Aina looked at Rolf in surprise. Rolf continued to say that healing potions exist, but they only heal external wounds or can displace poison that has entered the body. Rhodey still stood in front of Aini. He said that there was no potion that could cure the disease. Aino continued that the stranger said that she only had to drink the potion and her mother would immediately recover. Rolf insisted that, to his regret, Aina had been deceived by that man. Aina, without thinking twice, said that she had fallen for the stranger's cesspool. Aina got angry and tears appeared in her eyes. She was ready to cry. Shiro stood Rodham and watched what was happening. Lyra kicked the table with all his might. It flew into the eye. Shards flew in different directions. Lyra turned to Rolf and said that he was taking the order to find that merchant. Neska and Kilfa gathered with Lyra. Evil Lyra went to look for the criminal. Kilf and Neska went to spare him. Shiro and the others decided to visit Aina's mother. Shiro and the others walked along the road. Shiro remembered Aina's words when she told him about her mother's illness. She was rotting alive. Aina said that she learned about the disease from her grandfather at the drugstore. Karen replied that, as she had suspected, Aina's mother was indeed suffering. Shiro walked up the stairs and called Rolf to follow him. Together they walked up the stairs and Shiro whispered to Rolf what this illness meant. Standing on the second floor, Rolf said that as far as he knows, with this disease, body parts rot and the life force gradually burns out. There is one doctor who studies this disease, but even he does not know how to treat it, so most of them die. The boys approached the house. Aina said that this was her house. Shiro thought that Aina was getting to work from such a suburb. Karen stood silently. Aina sighed heavily. Aina opened the door with a happy face and said, "Mom, we've arrived." Aina held Shiro's hand and said that he needed to come in and meet her. The woman looked very much like Aina. She was lying on the bed covered with a blanket. She said her name was Stella. She was grateful to the guys for taking care of her daughter. Shiro perked up and said that there was no need for thanks. The woman sat down on the edge of the bed and said that she apologized for her appearance. Shiro got nervous and said that Stella should lie down and not get out of bed. Aina shouted that her mother should not get up. Stella replied that she could not lie in bed in front of guests. Stella wondered what she saw before Karen. Aina looked at her and said that she was the mayor of the city. Stella lay down on the bed and said why the mayor of the city decided to come to their house. Rolf answered that the mayor learned from Aina that her mother was not feeling well and she decided to visit her. Stella said that she apologized for disturbing her. Karen interrupted Stella and said that she should apologize to Stella since the mayor of the city should take care of her residents. Stella lay in bed and said with a smile on her face that she was very grateful that the guys decided to visit her. Karen smiled back at her. Stella sat up from her bed and asked Aina that when she managed to become friends with the mayor and didn't even tell her mother about it. Aina cheerfully answered that she now has many friends. Shiro, Mayor, and Rolf. The guys stood and smiled behind Aina. Aina continued that she also has friends, Lyra, Neska, and Kilf. They are great magicians. Stella smiled and said that Aina must be very happy to have so many friends. Aina was all beaming with joy and said that she was very happy about this. Stella was leaving. Aina leaned on the bed and said that Mom had eaten. Shiro made a delicious soup. Stella's face changed and she said that she was asking Aina for forgiveness because she couldn't cook for her. Aina replied that it was okay. She liked cooking herself. Aina walked away from her mother and said that she went to get water from the river. Rolf offered to help Aina. Stella sat on the bed and smiled. Stella turned away and thought. Then she turned around and told the mayor that she was sorry. But could she leave her and Shiro alone? She wanted to talk to him in person. Shiro and Stella were left alone. Shiro said what exactly Stella wanted to discuss with him. She said that she wanted to entrust Aina to him. Meanwhile, a cheerful Aina went with Rolf to get water. Stella sat on the bed and looked at Shiro. She said that after her death, could he look after her daughter? And when the mayor left the house, standing at the door, Stella asked Shiro to look after Aina after her death. The guy froze, looking at the woman who apologized to him for suddenly asking about it, but Stella had practically no time left. And then she clarified whether Shiro knew about her illness. The boy agreed with the woman. She asked if Aina cried while she was talking about her, and Shiro agreed again, remembering that moment. The woman sighed in annoyance. She thought so. Stella saw how her daughter tried her best to help, and as her mother, it was very painful for her to watch Aina's efforts. But the saddest thing was that the girl forced herself to smile in front of her mother so that Stella would not worry. Mom remembered that her daughter had changed a little recently. The girl began to smile like before, with all her heart, so Stella asked her daughter only once, "Why was the girl so cheerful lately?" Then the girl smiled happily, saying that she had just met a kind little brother. Stella smiled, saying that she now understood the reason for her daughter's joy. The woman turned to Shiro, saying that he was very similar to Aina's father. The woman said that when the guy first entered the house, she was very surprised. Then she thought that her husband had returned. Shiro apologized for not being Aina's father, to which Stella said it was okay. She then apologized to the boy for comparing them. After a short silence, the woman smiled, saying that she was simply very happy. Stella said that thanks to the guy, she remembered the face of her lover, which she had already begun to forget. She smiled, saying that now when she meets him, she will immediately recognize Aina's father. Shiro was a little confused, asking what Stella meant by meat. Stella understood that her body would soon turn to dust. The woman lowered her trembling legs to the floor and then got up from the bed, saying that her request might be impolite. She asked to look after her daughter. She was a crybaby, but the mother was very worried, and tears were running down her cheeks. The woman tried to take a step, but her legs couldn't hold her body, causing her to fall. Shiro asked her to be careful, and then caught Stella. Shiro blushed embarrassingly and froze, as did Stella. Then the guy asked if the woman was okay, to which she answered yes. The guy laid the girl back on the bed, thinking. Then Shiro turned to Aina's mother, and after a little hesitation, asked if he could touch her legs. Stella screamed in embarrassment, blushing deeply, and then lowered her legs to the floor, apologizing for her behavior. The girl didn't know what the guy was going to do, so she closed her eyes tightly. But when she didn't feel anything, she carefully looked at Shiro. The guy looked at the leg carefully, realizing that everything was as he thought. Stella didn't understand what was there, and then assumed that her legs were to his taste. The guy quickly said that this was not the case at all, and then added, looking at the girl, that he simply had a feeling that he knew the cause and the cure for her illness. Stella didn't believe what the boy said. Then Shiro said that his uncle, like Stella, was seriously ill, but now he was better. Stella looked at the guy with hope, who told her that he knew how to cure Aina's mother. The girl looked at the guy with hope. Did he really know how to cure her from the disease? Stella clenched her trembling hands into fists, and then she said that she did not want to die now. Tears were running down her cheeks. The girl grabbed the guy's hand, saying that she could not leave her little daughter alone. Shiro smiled encouragingly and assured the girl that everything would be fine and she would not die. He wanted to promise that Stella and Ina would live a long and happy life. But the mayor suddenly entered the house, asking if they had finished speaking. The girl followed her, saying that they had returned, and Rolf followed Aina. Before the three of them could finish their sentences, they stared at Shiro and Stella in surprise. They looked closely at their clasped hands, then at Stella's legs and her tear-stained eyes. The mayor and Rolf looked at the boy in amazement. Shiro turned around to look at his friends in fear, wondering how he could justify himself now. It was difficult for Shiro to make such a proposal when Karen and Rolf were looking at him menacingly, threatening him with their weapons. Aina approached her crying mother, asking if she was okay. Shiro hoped that Stella hadn't misunderstood him. He was scared to even imagine it. After a while, Shiro began to explain that this disease developed throughout his life. Then he said that in the place where he was born, it was called avidomyosis. Everyone looked at the board with interest. Shiro said that avidomyosis was a disease that occurs from malnutrition. Also on the board, in addition to the name of the disease and the cause, were written symptoms such as headache, increased fatigue, unsteadiness when walking, nausea, general weakness, numbness of the limbs, Shiro knew it was a terrible disease that made the limbs fail, but it was very easy to cure. The guy said that Stella needed to get enough vitamins that her body lacked. Aina understood everything, and then asked Shiro if her mother drank her medicine, that she would be cured. At these words, the guy only smiled. He left the house, getting ready to go to his world. He entered his granny's room, remembering her words that if someone gets into trouble, he should help him. Then he snapped his fingers, thinking about what he needed to buy. He used the skill Equal Exchange again. After some time, he returned to the other world, bringing the necessary medicines with him. Arriving at Aina's mother's house, Shiro put a jar of pills on the table. He knew that the pills might look a little inedible. While Rolf and Karen were examining the pills, Shiro assured Stella that this medicine would cure her of vitaminosis. Aina's mother thought about it and then said that the medicine was too expensive, but Shiro only told the girl not to worry about it. And when Stella wanted to object, Shiro said that they could return the money later. He looked at the girl, saying that as long as Aina smiled. After all, when he moved to this city, Aina was the one who helped him settle in. Then he said that now it was his turn to help. The boy asked Stella to drink all the medicine. The girl who was sitting in front of him with tears in her eyes called the boy and squeezed his hand, saying that she understood him. And then the bells rang. A month had passed since that day. The leaves of the trees were scattered in the wind, in different directions, when Shiro and Aina came to Stella again. Stella greeted her daughter standing on her feet. Anya asked her mother if she could stand on her feet and if she was feeling better. The girl agreed, saying that she was already feeling better, so it was not so difficult for her to stand. Aina noted that this was the case before, and Stella agreed with her daughter. Aina then asked her mother if she could sleep with the girl now, to which Stella smiled, saying that they would sleep together every day. The girl then moved from her place right into her mother's arms, calling for her mother all the time. Stella, with tears in her eyes, asked her daughter for forgiveness for making Aina worry all that time. And then she promised that they would always sleep together from now on. Shiro smiled and quietly left the house, closing the door quietly behind him. Now he could say with complete confidence that he was able to do it. Sitting on the balcony and admiring the sunset, the guy sipped his drink, thinking that now his good days would begin. Noting that this was the first good day. Stella had fully recovered thanks to the vitamins, so Aina bragged to the guy that now she couldn't sleep because she had been talking to her mother all night. She was happy because they had fun. Aina shared everything with the couple. She also told Shiro that she cooked nasu soup with Stella. She also said that they picked flowers and looked at a cat. And Shiro thought that Aina looked great, and that was the most important thing. Now, the Adventurers Guild Silver Moon officially joined the guild Fairy's Blessing and became its branch. In addition, the Blue Flash Squad also joined the fairies. At the same time, powerful adventurers from all over the world began to come one after another and explore the forest. On top of that, Shiro had earned nearly 50 million yen in the last 2 months, and if he continued to earn at the same rate, he would be financially secure and able to retire early. And while he was thinking that this day would soon come, he did not notice how Karen approached him. She then asked what day was coming soon, startling Shiro. The mayor then sat down on a bench, greeting Shiro, saying that the evening was quiet and beautiful. Having brought his breathing back to order, pressing his hand to his chest, the guy thought that his heart would jump out of his chest from fear. Karen laughed and then apologized. Then she looked away, asking what Shiro was drinking. Shiro offered to join him and drink to their city, to which Karen said that on such a day was certainly possible. After a while drinking the drink, the girl said that she liked the taste of this sake, and then asked if Shiro had stolen the drink. Shiro said that Karen didn't have to worry about that. Then, laughing, he said that he never lies. To which the mayor said that she would take her word for it, and then the girl pressed the guy's head so that he lay on her lap. The guy, frightened and embarrassed, asked her to stop. Karen leaned forward, advising the boy not to be so obedient if his words were true, to which Shiro said that the girl had drunk too much. Sighing, Karen said that the guy could move to their city, for which he thanked her, continuing to lie on the girl's lap. Karen stroked his hair, saying that it was not a reward. She just wanted to say that the guy did not have to be shy, and he could ask the girl for anything. The guy sat back down and said he didn't need it. He just wanted to do what he was good at. The mayor understood him, but then said that he was a man, and even more so a hero about whom songs were composed. Shiro asked to wait a minute, saying that he did not need to be treated like a hero. After all, He was just a greedy man for money. But then he said that he grew up with his grandmother, and she always told him that if people around a guy get into trouble, then he should definitely help them as much as he can. And then they will definitely help him if he gets into trouble. While listening to this story about Shiro's grandmother, Karen asked what his wonderful grandmother's name was. Then the boy looked at the mayor, saying that his grandmother's name was Arisa Kavami. The girl repeated her grandmother's name with interest, and then she grabbed the guy, asking if he was the grandson of that immortal witch Arisu. The guy didn't understand what the girl was talking about and what his granny had to do with it. Then Karen said that he probably didn't know that there were almost no foreigners on their continent, and few people had met the witch in person. Shiro asked the girl to wait a little, but she went on to say that Karen first met the witch Arisa at a harvest festival. She suddenly appeared in town, drinking sake and dancing. Shiro didn't understand, because it was impossible. His grandmother had disappeared 7 years ago. But Karen said that she remembered the previous year well. Then the immortal witch Aresu showed the girl the legendary sword of Mel Gibson's demon, which was made from pieces of stars. The guy extended his hand forward, asking the girl to wait, because he needed to process too much information. The boy thought about it, remembering that he had found a letter in his granny's room. He remembered reading her letter, in which Arisu asked her grandson for forgiveness. She apologized for not telling him that 80 years ago she was a witch who came to Japan from a world called Rufardio. And then all the details came together in the boy's head. Then Karen asked if Shiro knew about the sword of Mel Gibson's legendary demon. And the guy froze, remembering his childhood. He then asked his grandma who the man on the poster was, to which his grandma said it was her favorite actor in the world whose name was Mel Gibson. Karen then wondered if Shiro's grandmother could be that witch, and then agreed with it, because she had never seen such pills and items brought by Shiro before. The girl then asked if Shiro had met his grandmother yet, to which the boy replied that it had been 7 years since he had last seen her. He then asked for a minute. He walked to the edge of the balcony, took a deep breath, and then shouted at the top of his lungs whether his granny was alive. And then an echo came from the mountain. He returned to the modern world again, and sitting on the floor of his grandmother's house, he said that he didn't think his grandmother was still alive. He looked at the photo of his grandmother, saying that with that pose and face, Granny was not trying to understand other people. Then, getting up from the floor, he walked towards the portal, saying that he believed that she would come to the harvest festival. The day before, when Shiro was on the balcony with Karen, the girl realized that immortal Arisu was Shiro's grandmother, who silently disappeared without saying a word to the boy. Then the mayor said that if Shiro decided to go look for his grandmother right now, then she would understand him. Then she suggested that he stay in the city, because since the witch had appeared at the last harvest festival, she could appear this time too. The boy understood what the girl meant about him staying until the harvest festival. Karen said that this year would be the 120th anniversary, and since she was the mayor, she wanted to make it a proper spectacle. There were 2 months left until the harvest festival. That day, Karen offered to help the guy organize the festival. She didn't have to ask the guy twice because Shiro loved festivals, so he immediately agreed. He wanted to set up his own booth at the festival, but he was sure there would be many food booths. Shiro wanted to set up a goldfish booth, but he was sure there were no goldfish there. Then he thought of making a shooting range. But there would most likely be people with bows or throwing knives there too, so that idea also flew by. Then he thought about the lottery, but that was just a scam, so that wasn't a good idea either. Shiro sighed. He didn't think setting up a tent without food would be that difficult. The boy knew there had to be something suitable. He began to recall his childhood memories. He froze, remembering one interesting thing. This was exactly what he needed. He remembered about cameras. The girl looked at the objects in front of her with interest, asking the boy what was lying on the table in front of her. Shiro was glad that Aina asked him about it. Then he answered the girl that these things were called cameras. He said that these were amazing items with which he planned to make a new product to sell. The girl did not quite understand what the guy was talking about. Then Shiro thought that it was easier to show than to explain in words. Taking one of the cameras in his hands, the boy asked to look at him. He caught a good shot, then clicked the button. After waiting a bit, the guy took a photo of the girl out of the device, showing it to Aina. The girl was surprised, looking at herself. She did not understand how Aina could be inside. The girl asked how she could shrink and fit inside. Then he explained that the camera was a magical object that could depict pictures, people, and things happening in the blink of an eye. And then he suggested that Aina try it herself. Shiro asked Aina to smile and then took some wonderful pictures of the cute girl. Aina happily looked at her photos, which made Shiro happy. Then the girl took the camera in her hands and took a photo of Shiro, following her friend's advice. She clicked the button and then handed the camera over. Aina wondered if she had succeeded, to which Shiro, looking at the girl's work, said that everything had turned out great. Then Aina suggested to the guy to make more cards with Shiro, to which the guy agreed and began to pose as a model. After playing with the cameras for a bit, Shiro said that was enough, suggesting that they stop there. The girl asked why, to which Shiro showed her another camera, saying that it was called a Polaroid. And while the girl was looking at the cameras with interest, admiring the fact that there were many of them, Shiro suddenly clicked the button of the Polaroid, catching Aina off guard. The guy was happy that he caught a girl with a strange face, while Aina was unhappy with such a photo. But then the girl called the guy, and Shiro also unexpectedly took a picture of him, happy that she was able to catch him too. The guy laughed, realizing that the girl wanted to take revenge on him. He looked at the photo and froze because in the photo he looked like his grandma. His face was exactly like his grandma's in that photo, comparing it all to a haiku. After some time, Shiro took Aina home, where the girl's mother was already waiting for her. Stella thanked the guy for looking after the girl this time. Then Shiro asked how they liked the new house, noting that the girl was tired from moving. Stella admitted her tiredness and then thanked the guy while her daughter hugged her tightly. Stella and Aina were currently living in the house that Shiro rented to them, and this house was only a 10-minute walk from the store. Suddenly, Aina called the guy, who began to listen to her attentively, and then the girl said that her mother was bad at cleaning. With these words, she made her mother blush, who was ashamed of it. Stella reminded the girl that she had asked Aina not to tell anyone. Shiro said that he understood everything, and then he reminded her that Stella and Aina could feel free to ask him for help if they needed it. The girl thanked the guy, but then thought about it. The guy was already expecting something terrible, but the girl noticed that the guy was also very bad at cleaning, and now the two adults were confused by the girl's words. When Shiro was about to leave for his home, Aina called the guy and happily said that they would see each other the next day. The boy smiled, thanking the girl for the time spent together, and asked Stella to take care of herself before leaving. This was the seat of the Adventure Guild's Silver Moon. Now it was a branch of the Ninori Fairy's blessing. When Shiro first opened the doors to this place, the only thing that echoed to the building were Emil's sobs. But that was no longer the case. The voices of adventurers were heard in this place. Some of them had finished exploring in the northeast, but had not found any ore. Others said they had returned from exploring the southeast. They had gathered information about the monsters they had encountered. Other adventurers had found a river where they had found a good campsite if they traveled east for 3 days. The days of Shiro's crisis seemed so far away now. In just 2 months, the guild had become the busiest in the Gararma kingdom. Emil offered to buy materials from her when suddenly she noticed Shiro and then called him. The guy was a little surprised to see the girl. She asked why he would come at such a time and then smiled. The girl then leaned closer to the guy, pointing her finger at his shoulder, suggesting that he had come to see her, and then asked if he wanted to give her an expensive gift. But the guy denied it, saying that he came because he promised to have dinner with everyone at the Blue Flash. The girl began to imagine how she would live with a guy in a high-class castle, ride in a carriage, and lie on high-class dragons throwing money from the sky. Then she said that she was completely ready to become a wife at any moment, if Shiro promises that Emil will live in luxury. The girl licked her lips, saying that Shiro can do whatever he wants with her. She said that the guy should have noticed that she is quite loving. He ordered the girl not to unbutton her shirt and to continue doing her work. But Emily said she was just taking a break, and she pinned the guy against the wall, asking him to get drunk with her. But Shiro was completely against this idea. He said that it was better to stay away from a woman who drank all night long. After all, it was his grandmother's will. He continued to fight against the girl, saying that he had recently learned that his grandmother was still alive. Emil didn't understand what the guy was talking about now. People watching the squabble between these two thought that they were starting a showdown again. The girl looked at their clasped hands, saying that if the guy was grabbing her hand so passionately, it meant something. But the guy said that he was trying to push her away so as not to get into trouble. Emil tried to get closer to the guy, answering that often the answer no means yes. The girl again told the guy to come closer, but Shiro shouted that there was an octopus in the market. Suddenly, a silhouette appeared behind the girl, and then the girl, with one kick, pushed Emil away from the guy, sending the girl into the octopus trap. Kilfa smiled at the boy, asking if the boy was okay, while Shiro looked in awe at his salvation. They arrived at the guild bar. All the adventurers were sitting at the table, drinking drinks. Shiro was crying to Kilfa, happy that the girl had saved him. Then, at the table, they explained that when the full moon approaches, the rabbits begin a special period. Emil thought she didn't have it. To which Nezuka said that the girl was persistent towards Shiro, and that was a sign of an unhealthy relationship. Rolf agreed with the witch, saying that the girl tried to pick the unattainable fruit without any effort. To which Emil said that she was close to winning. Then everyone was a little surprised that the girl had forgotten to sit at their table and eat with them. But Shiro was drawn to a voice. A seeker named Mojito Canhead was looking at another seeker furiously, asking if he wanted a fight since he had already gotten into one. The second seeker, Wise Whip, said that it was the job of the wise to discipline the idiots, so they decided to fight each other. One of the observers said he would bet 5 silver coins on the bully. Another said he would bet 10 silvers on the masked man. Shiro wanted to get up from his seat, saying that they had to stop the fighting, but he was stopped. For adventurers, such fights were just a greeting. Also in such a place, everyone with plans that were ruined gathered. Shiro understood what his friend was talking about. Then he said that all the seekers here were elites who had gathered here to search for ruins. In other words, they were all first-class veterans. It had been 2 months since this place became the fairy's blessing, but no one had been able to find these ruins yet. Therefore, the searchers were sad. That was the whole point. What was worse, there was no entertainment, and they were in the jungle with nowhere to blow off steam. There was nothing they could call entertainment in Nurich, and while Shiro was explaining everything, Emil, who was under the table, called the guy. Shiro looked at the girl with displeasure, telling her not to start unbuttoning her shirt. The girl replied offendedly that she would not do this in public. The guy thought that Emil had done this before. Then she went on to say that when Lear said the word incertainment, he meant something completely different. The guy didn't understand what the girl was talking about. Emil looked at Shiro, saying that he was a little stupid. Then she pressed herself against the guy, saying that if they were alone in the store, then everything would be perfect. Hearing this, Nezuka kicked Lear's foot with her heel, causing him to scream, saying that there was no reason to do this. Emil laughed, asking why he was panicking so much. Nezuka then asked the boy not to say such embarrassing things, to which Lear angrily said that the only one who said that was Emil. He then sighed, calming down a little, and said that he had no experience in that activity, but he didn't have time to finish when Nezuka stepped on his foot again. Lear screamed again in anger, asking the girl to stop stepping on his foot with her heel. And while they were talking, the fight was already coming to an end, revealing the winner. Then someone asked what was going on with all the noise. Everyone looked at the guildmaster, who entered with fear and said that there should be no fighting in her guild. She asked if that was true, to which everyone responded with a denial. And then they promised that no one would do it. The girl then walked up to the table where Shiro was sitting, asking him if she had shown something unsightly. Shiro thought that she had leadership. Then she looked at the ears sticking out from under the table, and then turned with a smile to Emil, who frightenedly hit the back of her head on the table. Master asked why the girl was hiding under the table. Emil tried to come up with an excuse, but the girl warned that she would not tolerate any excuses. Then the guildmaster dragged Emil out of the bar, and she screamed for Shiro to save her, because his future wife was in trouble. The rabbit screamed to be forgiven, if only they wouldn't burn her salary. When the noise stopped and there was no screaming Emil nearby, Lear said that they had something they wanted to tell Shiro. Lear said that in fact, while they were searching the forest for ruins, they found a rare flower. Shiro was interested in the flower. Lear then briefly explained everything to Shiro, who listened to him attentively. The guy, without thinking, agreed to join their journey, asking in return to protect him from monsters. Lear smiled, saying that Shiro didn't have to worry because with all the intense training at the training grounds, they wouldn't be able to compare to their old selves. Then they joyfully clinked their mugs of drinks against each other one last time. Shiro watched a beautiful flower as it swayed gracefully in the wind. The flowers were called Apsala. The boy looked at the flowers that bloomed only near clean water. Nesuke, Kilfa, and Shiro were lying down surrounded by these flowers. And the latter was thinking that Aino would really like these flowers as she were with them. While they were enjoying this view, Lair came up to them. He jumped so that they wouldn't sleep on the flowers. And then he scolded Shiro a little for joining the girls. The boy scratched his head awkwardly and then apologized, but his legs were so tired from half a day of walking. Rolf got up from the flower field and said that they had to pick the flowers before sunset, and after that they could rest as much as they wanted. 1 week earlier, the Azure Flash found these flowers, called Apsara, while she was searching the ruins. It was a rare ingredient for high-ranking recovery potions, but on the way back, there was something wrong with the flowers. Then, Nesuke turned to Liru, pointing to the flowers. The Apsara flowers withered within a few hours of being picked. The sorceress said that neither keeping them in water nor using ice magic worked. She had no way to deliver the flowers to the apothecary in time. And then, when they were about to give up, Lear gave them a great idea. He remembered that Shiro had the necessary skill, and the boy agreed with Lear. He had one of the skills that he had once shown them, and that was spatial storage. Not only does it allow you to carry things without feeling the weight, but it's a trick that stops time for the item you're carrying. Lear said that they had gathered a lot and that it should be enough, and then they began to call Kilfa, so that she would wake up already. The sleeping girl moved her cat's ear and then said that enemies were moving towards them. Everyone looked in the direction from which the noise came. A huge group of fly swatters was flying towards them. They were huge. Lear counted about 17 of them. He told Shiro not to move and to be silent. The boy looked at the insects flying by, noticing that they were injured. Nesuke had also noticed that they were wounded by the wind. Rolf also thought that, given the blood's coagulability, they had probably fought with others. But suddenly the insects moved towards the seekers, noticing them. Lear told Rolf to protect Shiro, and then told the sorceress to begin casting the spell. She shot a fire arrow, causing one of the insects to burst into flames and fall to the ground. Rolf told the boy to stand behind him as the insect flew straight at them. But Kilfa threw her sword towards the enemy, but the weapon bounced off the insect. All the attackers flew towards Kilfa. The cat girl called Neska and she used a fireball, causing the insects to catch fire again as they fell down. Shiro realized that the insects were vulnerable to fire. He then ran to the side, taking out a canister from his pocket. Rolf shouted after Shiro, but he thought that the bear spray wouldn't work on the fly swatters. He told the seeker that it was okay, and then lit the lighter as well. He held the flame to the spray, pressing the spray button, and after he got an improvised flamethrower that started burning insects. Ralph was surprised, asking if Shiro was a sorcerer, to which the guy said, "The seeker should act." He understood and then struck the insect with his weapon, causing it to fall. Lear encouraged everyone and told them to continue in the same spirit. They continued to fight. They had 6 fly swatter bugs left to destroy. Shiro watched his friends, noticing that they had become stronger after training. Suddenly someone shouted to be careful. Now the insects started to attack Neska. Shiro wanted to use his improvised flamethrower. It wasn't very good, because the enemies were too close to the girl, and Shiro couldn't use it without hitting Neska. The guy got angry, and seeing that the girl was no longer able to cope with the insect attack, he ran to Neska, pushing the girl away, and then told her to be on guard. And now the insects were chasing Shiro. Everyone screamed the boy's name in fear as an insect attacked the boy's back, preparing to attack the boy. The beetle grabbed the boy in its paws, trying to bite him. Then Lear told the boy to run to the river and jump in, and as soon as he jumped into the water, the enemy let go of him. But the guy started to drown. He started to fall to the bottom. Neska began to read the spell, trying to save the drowning boy. And then Shiro's hand appeared above the water again. Lear asked the boy to swim to the shore, but Shiro's body began to float with the current, moving away from his friends. Then the seeker shouted that they would definitely find Shiro, but he had to wait for them. The boy opened his eyes, but everything was blurry. He heard someone asking him if Shiro was breathing. The boy thought that the flash of azure came to save him. A blurry silhouette, telling the boy to pull himself together. And then asked if he heard the girl. Then the guy raised himself and began to cough up the water he had swallowed. The stranger said that the guy was still alive. Shiro fell back onto the grass and then looked at his savior and asked who she was. The girl with wings in front of him put her hands on her hips, asking that the guy had never seen fairies before. The guy looked at the girl. He had never seen fairies before. He carefully examined his new acquaintance. But the girl did not like it and told the guy not to look at her like that, because she was embarrassed. The guy immediately apologized. Then the fairy noticed that the boy should have said something while he was admiring her. But the boy did not understand what he should have said, so the guy raised his hand in a friendly manner and said that it was nice to meet him. But the fairy replied that those were not the right words. Then she asked the boy who he thought pulled him ashore, because if she hadn't saved him, Shiro would have become fish food. And then the boy nervously thanked the fairy. Then the fairy asked how the guy got carried away by the current. She thought it was his hobby or something like that. But the boy rejected the fairy's suggestion, saying that he could have told everything. But the girl interrupted him, because it was clear to her that the boy had jumped into the river to escape the monsters. She then asked where the boy came from. Shiro said that he came from the city of Norich, which was located west of the forest. The fairy shouted excitedly, offering the boy to take her with him to the human city, namely Norich. But seeing the boy's expression, she thought that Shiro would not take her with him. The fairy, with tears in her eyes, said that it was bad. But Shiro said that he did not think so, and then asked if the fairy had any acquaintances in the city. The fairy said that there was a human man there. She said that the guy was a little taller than the guy. He was skinny and weak, but he always laughed so happily, and his hair and eyes were the color of the sky. The fairy then asked if Shiro knew such a guy. But the guy told the fairy not to think that they all knew each other just because they were the same species. Then he asked her to at least name the stranger. The fairy said sadly that she did not know his name. After all, he was the only person she had ever met, so she simply called him a person. The stranger said that he came to the forest to hunt monsters. Shiro then thought that the guy was a hunter or an adventurer. Then the boy crouched down to be at the fairy's level and said that the meeting in the forest sounded romantic. He was sure that they were lovers. But upon hearing the man's words, the fairy got angry and hit him on the head. Sitting on Shiro's head, the fairy said that a human and a fairy could never become lovers. They were just friends or something like that. She tried to find the words to describe it more accurately. And Shiro assumed that they were best friends, and the fairy agreed with the guy's words. Shiro smiled, noticing that the fairy was familiar with this forest. And the girl said that she was born and raised in this forest of Guinea. Then the guy offered to take her with him to the city, and in exchange, the fairy would lead him to a trapped part of the forest. Upon hearing Shiro's proposal, the fairy was happy that he would take her with him to Ninorish. The fairy said that the boy could count on her, and also said that she would protect him. Then she asked the guy to evaluate her magical skills, and then she took, and with the help of the wind speed, cut down several trees. The guy looked at what the little fairy had done in fear, impressed by her skills. He said that the fairy had overdone it a bit, to which the fairy replied that she had poor control over her magical power, but she assured him that everything would be fine as long as she was strong. She then revealed that recently fly beetles had tried to catch her, so she had to blow them away. And then the boy remembered the wounds on the monsters' bodies, realizing that it was the fairy who had wounded them. Then, saying that they had agreed, the boy introduced himself to the fairy, adding that it was nice to meet her. The fairy placed her small hands on the boy's little finger, saying that her name was Patty Falulu. And then after they got acquainted, she said that since she was the guide, the boy should call her the leader. Then after thinking for a bit, she suggested calling her boss. Then the fairy said that Shiro should call her boss. The guy agreed, calling her boss. To which the fairy laughed because she liked how it sounded and asked Shiro to call her that again. And the guy called her that again, which made the fairy squeal with joy. Then the guy said that if the fairy wanted, he could act like a suck-up. The girl did not like this change of speech, to which Shiro said that he would speak as a faithful minion of the fairy. But the fairy forbade the guy to fawn on her. Then he asked how about acting like a gangster, but Patty said that was also forbidden. Shiro agreed, saying that he, her slave, Shiro Amada, would serve faithfully as his savior. Then Patty asked the boy to stop talking like that because she didn't like it. While they were walking, it was already night, and the moon was shining in the sky. Sitting by the fire and warming herself, the fairy asked if the boy wanted to go home, or rather to his friends. The guy lit the stick with the fire and agreed, because they were friends, and he thought that they were probably even looking for him now. Patty said she understood the boy, and then there was silence. Suddenly, the fairy said she decided to help the boy find his friends. The boy couldn't believe the words. The fairy said that she was his boss. Then she asked if the boy was hungry. Because he was her ward, she said that she would give him something special. The boy looked at the fairy in surprise. She worriedly asked the guy what had happened. But Shiro only looked at her in amazement. After all, she also had a spatial storage. The fairy used magic, took out an apple from there, and then bit into it. Patty, chewing the fruit, looked at the guy, asking if he saw the spatial storage for the first time. Shiro thought that the fairy girl had the same ability as him. Then Patty said that all fairies had this ability. While continuing to eat the apple, Patty said that the storage was not at all rare, and then she took out the honey prepared by the fairy herself, saying that the drink would warm the guy. The guy took a sip, tasting it. He said admiringly that the drink was delicious. The fairy laughed, saying that Shiro could drink as much as he wanted. Then Patty said seriously that she would keep watch that night. So she told Shiro to go to bed as soon as he finished drinking. Shiro smiled at the fairy with a blush and then thanked her. The next morning, Patty began to explain to the boy that there were many other races in the forest besides fairies. She began to list all the goblins, orcs, terrible ogres, and many others, while the boy suffered from fatigue. Then the fairy pointed towards where the elf village was. Then she wanted to tell about the incident when she approached their barrier, but the boy interrupted the girl, asking if they could stop for a while. The fairy said that they could stop, but only for a while. Having made a halt, the fairy began to tell about the flower Babuna, whose nectar had a strange taste. Once she confused it with another flower. Shiro listened to the fairy's stories, thinking that Patty knew so many things. And the boy was sure that the adventurers did not know as much as the fairy did. The guy assumed that there was a country called Gyoushounin in this place even before the fairy herself was born. This country disappeared long ago, and now this place is called the Gyoushounin Forest. Shiro then asked that this country existed during the time of the ancient magical civilization, to which Patty replied that she did not know, since it was before she was born. Suddenly, the fairy felt something coming towards them, and then she flew to hide behind a tree, then ordered Shiro to hide as well. At this time, the friends were already looking for the missing Shiro. They called the boy loudly, hoping that he would respond to their call. Ralph screamed and asked Shiro to answer if he heard them. Lear leaned over the cliff crying and said that Shiro did not dare to say that he fell over the waterfall and died, and then added that he would not accept it. For such words, Neska hit the guy with her staff and asked him not to say that again, to which Lear apologized to the girl. The boy then looked at the sorceress, asking if the boy was alive. Neska ruffled the adventurer's hair, telling him that he would definitely be fine. At this, Kilf wanted to jump to the next tree, shouting that Shiro was definitely alive. But suddenly a raven grabbed the girl by the hood. The boy heard his friends continue to call him, and then he decided to get up from hiding. The fairy looked at the boy with displeasure, not understanding why he decided to get up from hiding, to which Shiro smiled and told the fairy not to worry because his friends were calling him. Those who were his companions. And while Patty was thinking about the guy's words, he screamed with all his might where he was. The adventurers heard him, realizing who the voice belonged to. They headed in the right direction, noticing that Kilful was not among them. At this time, the girl was flying in the claws of a raven while examining the lands below her. She noticed Shiro running and then called out to him happily. Shiro stopped and looked at the sky, surprised by the girl. Kilfa fought off the bird's claws and then began to fall straight towards the boy, crashing into him. The rest of the seekers looked at the object that fell from the sky, not understanding what it was. The guy came to his senses after the fall and then looked at the tearful girl, who thought that the guy had already died a long time ago. The cat girl then hugged the boy, saying that she would never leave him again, which Shiro only smiled at. After hugging the girl, the boy stood up from the ground. Looking at the other adventurers who had come to them, Lear bowed guiltily, saying that he was sorry because he was supposed to protect the boy. Neska followed him in apologizing, bowing. She said that Shiro had already saved her a second time, and now she owed him. The boy listened to their remorse and then said, "Wasn't that the most important thing?" adding that he was finally safe and with them again. The Seekers hesitated, and then Shiro asked if he was part of the Blue Flash, to which everyone immediately began to say that Shiro was their companion, and that Lear was wrong. And then Shiro asked them to rest a bit. Rolf approached the guide, noting that Shiro was able to do everything himself, but the guy said that someone saved him. She then let him introduce his savior. The Seekers froze in surprise, looking at the fairy who flew out from her hiding place. Lear nervously asked if Shiro was serious. The sorceress couldn't believe it either, asking the boy to explain everything. Lear then said that fairies were called an illusory race because they rarely showed themselves to people. Shiro then asked the fairies if that was really the case. Patty hesitated for a moment and said that they were forbidden to leave their village. The boy turned back to his friends while the fairy quickly flew towards Shiro from her hiding place, hiding behind his hair. Shiro thought that since the guild was called Fairy's Blessing, then Lear could find them anywhere. Patty asked the guy with displeasure why she had to bless people, to which Shiro replied that some other fairy could bless the guild. Then Neska realized that Shiro didn't know something, and after his question about what he didn't know, the sorceress confirmed that Shiro really didn't understand. The girl said that Fairy's Blessing was the name of a sake that was produced only by fairies, the legendary fairy's honey. Then Shiro asked the fairy about what his companions said about the drink the fairy gave him, noting that the drink was wonderful. And Petty said that the guy was right. The adventurers stared at Shiro in shock. Neska didn't want the boy to say that he drank the drink. Lyre looked at the guy in surprise. He couldn't believe Shiro's words. Then Niskaso asked again if he drank the fairy's honey. The seeker said that for the price of 1 mug of mead, you could buy a castle. Rolf added to his friend's words that, according to the guild's documents, the last time mead was sold at auction was about 200 years ago. Shiro was so surprised that this honey was so expensive. Patty only said that she gave it to Shiro because he was her subordinate. Everyone was surprised by the fairy's statement, to which Shiro thoughtfully scratched his cheek, and then told his friends how everything really happened. And after the guild listened to the boy's story, they realized what had happened and were a little shocked that the boy had been saved by a fairy. Lur then called Patty, who peeked over Shiro's shoulder. The boy thanked the fairy for saving their friend. He wasn't sure if that would be enough of a thank you, but he offered to do something for the fairy so she wouldn't be embarrassed to ask. Shiro had an idea and then asked if Lear could help the fairy find someone. After asking who, Lear heard a description of a guy whose hair and eyes were blue. Even though the description of appearance was not enough, the adventurer said that he could help the fairy. And now that they were reunited, they decided to return to Ninorik. They walked along the road, and after a while their city became visible. Patty looked at the houses in the distance with admiration. The fairy admired the human village, but Niska corrected Patty a little, saying that it was not a village, but a city. After all, people called settlements differently depending on their size. Patty nodded at the witch's explanation. After the fairy commanded Shiro to go forward to the city, Lear laughed at the situation, asking his friend if it was hard for him to be subordinate. Already in the city, Patty noticed a girl on an empty road, asking Shiro who she was. Aina saw a guy and then called him. The guy looked at the girl in surprise and then asked, approaching her, what she was doing there. Anya suddenly hugged the guy. She clung to him and cried, which surprised Shiro greatly. Stella stood behind the guy, saying that she was glad that the guy came home. The guy turned to the girl, who was standing and smiling. Shiro said goodbye to his friends and then walked with Stella and Ina to their house. The girl fell asleep on her mother's back. And then Stella said that Ina couldn't sleep all night because she was worried about Shiro. Then the guy asked about Stella herself, to which she replied that she wasn't particularly worried. Then she sighed and thought that soon her mother would not be able to carry her daughter on her back. She quickened her pace, saying that she could do it now. Shiro agreed with the girl, and then added that if Stella got tired, having reached the limit, then the guy could take the girl in his arms. But Stella answered with a denial, and then, smiling, said that she would not give Aini away because she was her mother. After a while, they reached the girl's house, after which Shiro wished his daughter and mother good night. He had already turned around, getting ready to leave, but Stella called the guy saying that she forgot to say something. Stella smiled and then said that she was glad that Shiro came home, while Aina was sweating sleepily. The boy smiled back at the girl, thinking about him coming home. Then the boy came to his house, and the fairy that was with the boy all this time was amazed by his house. She admired the large size of the house, flying up to the ceiling while Shiro watched her. Then he asked what kind of houses the fairies lived in. Patty then said that they built houses in trees so the monsters couldn't attack them. Then the fairy asked if the guy had forgotten about their agreement. Shiro said that of course he remembered that he had to find her friend. He assured the girl that the town was small, so he was sure that they would find it quickly. So they would go looking for it the next day. And Patty was glad of the words of her new friend. Then the boy asked the fairy if it was really that hard to make that amazing honey. But Patty said it was even easy as long as she had regular bee honey. Then she said that honey wasn't that easy to get. And while Patty was talking about how she was attacked by a swarm of bees when she tried to collect honey the last time, Shiro began to look for something in his briefcase. Then the guy pulled a jar of honey out of his backpack, asking if that was the kind of honey they needed. And Patty said the guy did a great job. She looked at the jar of honey in surprise. She couldn't believe that it was a 100% natural honey jar from a beekeeper. She dipped her finger into the sweetness and then tasted it. The fairy ate the honey with admiration, admiring its taste. She then said that she could make another drink if she used this honey. The guy hoped that she would. But then he told Patty it was time to go to bed, noting that he had been sleeping on the ground for so long that his body ached all over. After the night, the morning came. Shiro was sleeping on the couch and a fairy was lying on his head. They were sleeping very soundly. Aina, who came to visit the guy, began to wake the guy up. Shiro sleepily opened his eyes, asking the girl why she was there because the store was closed that day. The girl took out a small bag, saying that her mother asked her to bring the boy some lunch. Shiro yawned, stretching out his arms and saying that he understood. The girl then leaned towards the boy and asked who the girl was, who was now lying on the boy's hair. Shiro introduced the boss fairy Patty to the girl, who at that time also yawned, trying to wake up from sleep. Aina looked at the fairy with admiration, saying that she had seen such fairies in her picture books. And when the girl took the fairy in her hands, happily looking at the fairy race, Patty asked the boy with displeasure who the girl was. Shiro answered that Aina was helping him with the store. Then the boy remembered that he wanted to ask the girl something. He asked if Aina had seen a man with blue hair and eyes. Aina looked at the fairy for a moment, then apologized, saying she didn't know such a man. Patty looked at the girl sadly. Shiro then said that neither he nor Aina could know everyone in this city, and then added that he was sure that if they asked around, they would quickly find him. The fairy agreed with the guy, so they decided to start searching. Then Aina said that she also wanted to go with them on the search and help find the fairy's friend. Shiro asked Patty if they could take the girl with them, and the fairy happily agreed. And then, overcome with emotion, she flew high above the roof. So the guy thought that they should hide Patty first. Then Aina thought for a moment, turning her back to the guy offering to hide Patty in the backpack. Shiro agreed with the girl, putting the fairy inside, from where Patty stuck her head out, and then taking the girl by the hand, Shiro suggested to start searching. Their search began with questioning the townspeople. They asked an old woman, but she said what difference did it make if it wasn't Shiro? They then asked a passing couple, to which the man asked the searchers if they had seen a man with a chain. But his companion replied that they had not. Then they asked a passing cab that he hadn't seen anyone like that either. Then they asked a kebab vendor, but he denied it and then offered the seekers to buy a kebab from him. The woman who was handling the papers said she didn't remember seeing the chain before. Then she said if they could give the man's name, she could help them find him. Then they approached the jeweler, who looked at the picture carefully and said that there were no such pictures in his shop. They even asked the dog that just barked at them. They went into a bar and the guy there said he didn't know the chain, and then asked them to leave him alone. After an unsuccessful search, Shiro thoughtfully looked at the photograph in his hand where a chain was depicted. This was the 27th person interviewed, but they still had no leads. Then Aina asked if that guy could live somewhere other than Ninarich, to which the fairy said that her friend said that he was going to Ninarich. The only clue was a chain, like the fairy herself. Shiro printed out a photo he had taken with a new camera. And while the guy was thinking, the mayor called him, who was looking for him. She heard that he went on a trip with the blue flash. And then she asked the guy not to make her worry so much. The boy apologized to Karen, to which the girl looked away, saying that he didn't have to apologize. She stroked the boy's hair, adding that the main thing was that Shiro was safe and sound. Suddenly, Anna asked the boy why his face was so red, to which Shiro began to justify himself by saying that he was very hot. Then the boy decided to ask the mayor if she had seen the chain. The girl carefully examined the photo. After thinking for a bit, Karen said that she had seen such a chain, but she couldn't remember exactly. Then she said that if she remembered anything, she would definitely tell Shiro. The guy was very grateful to his friend, who said that it was time for her to go because the guild's business did not wait for her. Then the guy asked if Karen had business with Emil, but the girl said no. Then she said furiously that she had business with those who had endangered her dear friend, namely the Blue Flash. Hearing the girl, the guy wanted to stop her, saying that it was his fault, but Karen waved her off, saying that they would talk later. Shiro then asked Lyra and the others for a chance to avoid being punished by an enraged Karen. But before the boy could finish thinking about how his friends would be punished, Ina said that she would like to sleep with Patty that night. The fairy quickly shook her head, looking first at the girl and then at Shiro, who asked the fairy if she could sleep with Ina. Sighing, Patty couldn't do anything about Shiro and Ina, so she made an exception, but only for one night. And so after searching, Aina came home, told her mother that she was back, and then hesitated a little. She told Stella that she wanted to show her something, and then she asked to keep it a secret from everyone. The girl listened attentively to her daughter and then smiled and promised that she would not tell anyone. Then Ina said that she would open the backpack now. Her mother thought that her daughter could have brought a lizard or a frog into the house. And when the backpack was opened, Stella and Ina looked inside. Patty looked at them, and then said that Stella and Ina's eyes and hair were the same. Stella looked at Patty carefully, realizing that she was looking at a real fairy, after which she went into shock. It was already getting dark outside when Patty jumped on the bed, saying that for the first time in her life she had seen such a soft bed. She continued jumping on the bed, laughing along with Ina, while Stella brought them brewed cups of tea. A woman's hand began to move the hot cups of fruit tea that Shiro had brought them onto the table. Then Stella asked the fairy to tell her about the man she had mentioned at dinner. The girl said that she would like to hear a story too. After thinking for a moment, Patty decided that she would tell them that story too. It happened when she first left the village. When she met that guy, he was hunting for a rabbit. Then she remembered that she had seen a man shooting a bow clumsily and a hare constantly running away from him. Then it seemed to the fairy that the stranger was about to burst into tears. Patty then thought that he was acting like a child, and it was so funny to her that she burst out laughing when she watched him. And then, when he began to cry bitterly, Patty decided to help the unfortunate hunter. With the help of an air splitter, she caught the hare. Then the boy stared in shock at the beast in his arms and realized, turning to Patty, that it was a fairy in front of him. And that's how she met him. Then the boy, with tears in his eyes, told Patty how delicious the horned hares were. And at first the fairy thought that the people had a very strange taste in food. But when she asked the stranger, he replied that he had not eaten normal food for about 10 days. Then the new acquaintance smiled at the fairy and thanked her for saving him. Then he asked if he could find out the fairy's name. Patty then sighed sadly, remembering how her relatives told the girl not to approach them. So the fairy said that she would tell her name only when the boy became a good hunter. And from the next day, the fairy watched as her new friend began to train. He learned to climb trees. He ran from a swarm of insects. He learned to shoot birds. He skillfully caught hares and even defeated a large snake. He improved every day. And when he was able to defeat the wolf, he said that he had become better, and now it was time to tell the fairy her name. And then the fairy had already decided to tell him her name. But she again remembered the painful memories when she was told that no one was glad to see her. While the girl was trying to fight her bad memories, a new acquaintance recognized her. Then Patty said that she would tell the name another time. That was the last time they met, Patty said. But he and the fairy were friends. The two loners met and made a good, so she would have to tell him her name after they met. And then the fairy would know his name too. Then Patty smiled and apologized for her boring story. Suddenly, a drop of water fell on her. The fairy did not understand what was happening. She thought that the roof of the girl's house was leaking. But then she looked up. Ina was crying, saying that they would definitely find her friend. Patty turned to Ina and then stammered that they would definitely find him, while Stella looked at them and was touched. 2 hours earlier, Shiro had exited the portal, returning to Nina Reach. The boy was thinking about how he hadn't washed himself at home for a long time, and now it was time for him to enjoy the sunset of the city. He walked to the edge of the balcony when a guy from the street called him. Shiro saw Lear, saying that he would go down to him. The guy ran out of the house, but when he got closer to his friend, he stared at him in shock. In front of him stood a guy with a swollen cheek. Shiro asked what happened to Lear and why his cheek was like that. Lear looked away, saying that nothing terrible happened. At the moment when Karen said goodbye to Shiro, she went to the guild. The mayor called Lear. She wanted to talk about traveling with Shiro, to which Lear said that he would not make excuses, and if the girl wanted to hit him, she could do it. But before he could finish speaking, Karen slapped the guy with all her might, causing the guy's head to turn away. And now, standing in front of Shiro, the guy told him not to worry and then suggested that his friend go and have a drink at the guild bar. Then he added that Master and Amy would be there, which didn't sound so bad. And so they were sitting at the bar again, knocking their mugs of drink together. Everyone was smiling happily and enjoying the meeting. Shiro took a sip from his wooden mug and then looked at the contents. Lear asked him if something was wrong. Then the guildmaster suggested that the boy didn't like the ale, and Shiro honestly admitted that it was, and then apologized. The girl told the guy not to worry because she didn't find the drink really tasty either. The guy was surprised, to which the master replied that she usually didn't speak about it out loud. Unfortunately, the choice was not great. Some complained and asked to cook something tastier, but imports were not cheap then. Then Kilfa said that if they had the opportunity, she would like to drink wine or cider, to which Neska replied that it was a luxury for them. Then, Shiro asked about sour and tasteless drinks. Lear noticed this and assumed that Shiro had never tried wine at his age, or someone like Shiro could only drink expensive wines. Shiro immediately denied it, explaining that there was plenty of delicious and cheap wine in his hometown. Everyone looked at the guy with interest when he said that there were 3 types of drink: red, white, and rose wine. Shiro also heard that orange wine had recently become popular and that there were several more of each type. The guy said that there were many flavors, from sweet to sour, light and heavy in taste wines. The prices also varied. Even a child could buy some drinks with his pocket money, and there were wines that cost more than a whole house. There were also connoisseurs of the drink, who drank various wines during dinner, tasting them. The guy himself preferred sake, of which there were also 3 types: Jinjo, Jumei, and Hanjozo. Then Shiro stopped, realizing that everyone was looking at him. One of the adventurers told the boy to continue talking. Shiro nodded and then continued to say that his hometown had a lot of trade, so it was easy to buy any drink there. Everyone in the bar looked at the guy with their shining eyes, and then the guy thought about it, realizing something important. Selling drinks was even a very good business idea. He thought that if all went well, he would be able to catch not 2, but 3 birds with 1 stone. He stood up abruptly from his seat, addressing everyone in the bar, and then asked those present to come to this bar in 3 days, because he wanted to treat them to drinks from his homeland. The day came, or rather the night, when Shiro, from his usual self, combing his hair back, made his disguise. Ina smiled at the boy, saying that he looked absolutely gorgeous, and Shiro said the same to the girl. He then noted that Stella looked like she was screaming that she was ready to go. This place was Shiro's bar. They specially made this counter in the guild bar, which was handcrafted from plywood and wooden boxes. Lear approached them, praising them for their good work, and then asked if the lovely girls in the form of Stella and Ina had helped him. Shiro awkwardly agreed with Lear's assumption, remembering how Ina told him that she wanted to help the boy too, to which Shiro then thought that an 8-year-old in a bar was a dubious idea. Then Ina suggested that if her mother came too, then she could help, to which Shiro finally agreed. He was distracted from his memories by Neska and Kilf, who used the sorceress's ice magic to submerge the drinks in ice to keep them chilled. Shiro thanked the girls. For helping the guy, the girls received a bottle of their favorite drink for their help. Kilf chose fruit wine, and Neska chocolate liqueur. Shiro then turned to Aina, asking if the girl wanted anything. After thinking for a moment, the girl smiled, asking the boy for grape juice. There was already a huge crowd of people gathered outside the bar doors, eager to enjoy their drinks. Shiro thanked everyone for waiting, and then he wanted to make one last announcement, saying that the celebration for their hard work had begun. All the adventurers cheered. First, the guy wanted to thank them all for their hard work in scouting the forest. Then Shiro introduced himself, saying that he was the owner of Shiro's shop. He said the guy wanted to offer them a selection of drinks available in his shop. Someone in the crowd said the guy was joking. Shiro then said that they had also prepared snacks that went well with the drinks, and then asked them to enjoy them. Someone in the crowd said that there were rumors that Shiro was an alchemist, and someone shouted that he was tired of ale, so he asked for tasty drinks. Shiro shouted that he would treat them so everyone could drink as much as they could if they wanted to bankrupt him. The guy bought drinks for 3 emi, and this worried the guy a lot. But he understood that it was just an investment that should pay off soon. Then he gave the floor to the charming guild leader, Nei Mirage. The girl greeted everyone and then said that they could drink as much as they wanted, but so long as it didn't affect their work the next day. Everyone cheered and then started pushing to get to the bar first, almost running over Shiro in the process. The master loudly slammed her heel on the floor and then, looking warningly at the customers, asked them to let her sort things out. The customers were then asked to stand in line. Lear came up to the counter and Shiro asked him what he wanted. He hesitated for a moment and then pointed to one of the bottles. Shiro said it was called beer and recommended it to his friend. Lear agreed to take it, after which Aina suggested that the guy squeeze lime into the drink and then it would become even tastier. The boy tried to do as the girl suggested, and after taking a few sips, he was delighted. He did not understand what was with this drink. It was bubbly and so light, and the juice made the drink much tastier. Lear took another sip from his mug, as everyone watched him. Shiro suggested trying some more salt, saying it would taste even better. Many people asked for the same thing that Lear ordered. Everyone enjoyed the party. Shiro asked Stella to bring the 4th bottle, which was on the right side, and Aina to bring a Mexican drink. Many people asked for more of their favorite drinks. Shiro knew that everything was going well and that everyone was enjoying everything. He smiled, calling the next customer. A man approached him, ordering something stronger. He asked the guy to give him the strongest of what the guy had in stock. The adventurers looked at the newcomer in surprise because it was the indestructible Erdos, who was one of the 16 heroes. Shiro smiled at his guest, offering him one of the drinks that, when drunk, made a person feel like they were on fire. Erdos picked up the glass, not understanding what was with the cup, and then glared at the guy, saying that he was a 200-year-old dwarf, and now Shiro treated him like a child. But the guy said he wasn't laughing at him. He explained that the drink was so strong that a small amount of it could take the ground from under your feet. Erdos became even more angry, thinking that Shiro had decided to humiliate him, since the man had never gotten drunk in his entire life. Amada asked the guest to calm down, warning him that if the dwarf drank too much, he could die. Erdos sighed, saying that he understood what the boy meant by that, and then he threw his cloak aside, saying that if the guy wanted to fight, they should go outside. But Rolf came to the aid of the frightened Shiro. He turned to Erdos, saying that he was a priest. The dwarf decided that the priest also wanted to convince him. He said that Shiro tried to insult the dwarf race, for strong drink was in their blood, and their children had been brought up on a barrel of ale for a pacifier. They had never drunk in such humiliating quantities. Rolf smiled, saying that he might be angry, and then asked if he might be allowed to suggest something. Erdos became interested. Then Rolf said that their priests treated not only poisons, but also intoxications with the help of the sacred speech of healing. So if Erdos got drunk and couldn't stand on his feet, Rolf could heal him. Shiro and Erdos agreed with the priest. Then the man stood up, asking the boy if he was sure the dwarf wouldn't be able to stand on his feet. And then he asked the boy not to make him laugh. After all, the dwarf had defeated the ancient dragon as well as the demon king. He defeated a 1,000-year-old golem, Koshei the Deathless, lizard knights, a squad of goblins, a Cerberus from the underworld, berserker skeletons, a vampire queen, and none of them could knock Erdos off his feet. All the guests knew all these monsters that were legends, and had no doubt that one of the 16 heroes fought them. He was strong not only in spirit but also in body. Erdos then proposed a bet. If he fell over from drinking the drink, he would have to do any task Shiro asked him to do. The guy asked if the hero could resist. Then Erdos added that the guy would pay for all the gnome's drinks for the rest of his life. The man then held his mug out, ordering Shiro to fill it. Sighing, the boy began to fill it with liquid, then pushed it back to the man, who took him at his word. Erdos brought the drink to his nose and then sniffed it, making sure it smelled right. His nose began to burn more than any other drink he had ever had. The man began to drink the drink. All the visitors looked expectantly at the man, who, without looking up from the mug, drank its contents. And when the last drop ended up in the man's mouth, everyone looked at the hero with admiration except for Shiro, who became slightly nervous from what he saw. Exhaling, Erdos said that the drink was harshly heating his stomach, and then slammed the mug down on the table, asking Shiro, rubbing his mustache, if he thought the man was drunk. Everyone silently watched the two of them. After thinking for a bit, Shiro rubbed the back of his head awkwardly, thinking that he had lost after all. One of the 16 heroes laughed loudly, holding his stomach, realizing that the boy had just realized that he had lost. He then happily said that he would drink at Shiro's expense forever. The man continued to laugh loudly, throwing his head back, and then fell to the floor unconscious. Shiro addressed a dejected Erdos, saying that he had warned him that he shouldn't have drunk so much. After all, if it weren't for Rolf's spell, the hero would have already died. Some didn't know if he was a hero or not, but they had never seen anyone so dejected. And there were whispers everywhere that Erdos had lost to someone in a drinking game for the first time, and it was unimaginable. Many tried to remember the name of that deadly drink, racking their brains, but someone suggested calling this drink Hero Killer. And many agreed with the new name of the liquid. And the Hero Killer quickly became a phenomenon among adventurers. And after a while, the sleeping bodies of adventurers were lying on the floor, and empty bottles were next to them. Nesco looked at the bottle in her hand, thinking that it was the first time she had ever had such a delicious drink, and then remarked that she would like to share it with her parents. Next to her sat a contented and blushing Kilf. Lear asked, slightly hesitantly, if it was normal that Shiro poured everything for free. The guy admitted that it was terribly expensive, but it was a small price to pay for the dependence of the Seekers. Lear chuckled, as he expected from the cunning businessman. Watching the two drunk men, Shiro agreed, saying that it would be a stress reliever for the adventurers. And Aina could help him with the delivery. When everyone calmed down, Shiro allowed Stella and Aina to leave early. Then Kilfa hit the businessman with all her might, saying that he was good. Shiro said that he was hurt by her blow, but the girl smiled, saying that she hadn't hit him hard yet. After thinking for a while, Lear realized what the real reason was for gathering all the adventurers here. The boy was surprised when Lear approached one of the boxes, saying that fairy wings were sticking out of it. Shiro realized that he had been found out, and then he turned to his little friend, asking if she had seen her friend. The fairy, who was sadly sitting inside hugging her knees, said that she did not see him. Then Shiro assumed that her friend was not an adventurer. The fairy apologized to the boy because he had done so much for someone like her. Sheer called Patty again. It was raining outside. After all, the days passed, but they still did not find the fairy's friend, who sat and watched the rain. They asked people about the chain and even posted posters with the guy's facial features. Shiro then suggested that her friend might have left New Norwich, explaining that people lived in many places other than this city. The fairy then suggested that there were about 10 or 20 such places, to which Aina said that there were many more such places. The fairy thought that there were too many of these places, so she was thinking about how she would search them. The fairy looked up at Karen, who had come to the guy's house. She had a small chest in her hands. The girl came closer, saying that she thought she knew who they were looking for. She opened the chest, saying that she was looking at home after they showed her the photo, and then offered the guy to look at the contents of the chest. The girl took out the same pendant with a chain, which surprised the guy greatly. Karen said that this chain belonged to her great-great-great-grandfather, the first mayor of Ninurich. Then Aina asked who the great-great-great-grandfather was. Shiro explained with his family tree that it was the grandfather's grandfather. Karen asked why they were looking for her great-great-great-grandfather. Shiro was about to come up with an excuse, but Patty interrupted him. She flew forward in front of the girl, looking at her seriously. Karen looked at the fairy in front of her, unable to believe it. The mayor then asked Shiro what was going on. She knew it was hard to believe, telling the guy that her great-great-grandfather knew a fairy. And then Patty asked where her relative was now. Karen stared at the fairy in surprise, not understanding what she meant. If Karen was his grandson's child, she would have known where her friend was, since Karen was also his family. Then Karen would surely know where he was now. The mayor looked at the fairy thoughtfully and then realized. She asked Patty how long fairies lived. After thinking for a while, Patty said that fairies lived for about 3,000 years. But Patty herself was only 300 years old. Shiro watched the conversation silently as Karen told the fairy that humans don't live to be 100 years old. Then the girl said in other words that the person the fairy was looking for was dead and had been for a long time. The fairy froze. She couldn't believe it. She remembered how her tribesmen hated her and told her to leave them. No one was ever happy to see her, and they constantly asked why Patty hadn't been banished yet. No one cared about her. Even her parents hated the fairy. They wouldn't care even if the girl was gone. That's why she broke the rules and left the fairy village. That night there was no moon in the sky. But then she met her friend. For the first time, someone looked at her so kindly when they saw the fairy. For the first time, someone thanked her for her help. For the first time, someone smiled at her when the fairy said that she would not tell her name until her friend became a good hunter. For the first time, someone played with her while her friend was training. For the first time, they got into a fight with each other, doing little dirty tricks on each other. And for the first time, she knew that there was someone who would do anything to save Patty. Then her friend fought the clawed, terrible monster to save Patty. For the first time, someone gave her a gift. Then, lying on the grass, her friend showed the fairy the pendants he had made himself and said that they were a pair. The guy said that last time the fairy gave him some beautiful stones, which the guy used to make jewelry. Then he suggested making these pendants as proof of their friendship. Patty was surprised then, to which her friend said that they would always remember each other even if they were far away, and then suggested naming them from artifacts. Then the boy said that they were best friends now, much more than just friends, because they meant a lot to each other. The fairy couldn't believe that she had no friends before. She cried because of her friend's words, because then she skipped the friendship stage and immediately found her best friend. Seeing the fairy's tears, the guy was very confused. But Patty said that she was not crying, turning away from her friend. Then she cried for the first time from happiness. And, for the first time, she didn't want to lose anyone. Then the guy reminded her again that the fairy should have already revealed her name to him. Then she thought that if she revealed her name to him, she would never see him again. After all, she remembered that the guy had already mentioned that they could be far from each other. Then she said again that they would say each other's names next time. And then Patty thought that their happy days might soon be over. The boy only smiled at the little fairy's words and said that he would wait. That's why she never told her best friend her name.